just pull it.
All right.
Take her out. That's it for now. We'll see.
Thank you. I hope so. If I didn't, good thing I have my password there. I'd probably forget it. No, it's just sometimes I lose my place when I put my password in. Thanks.
Or do you have a? Did you put any days in? Did you? Yeah.
Bet it works this time.
Or do you have a? Yeah, it's gonna be okay. Thank you.
It just, if I would type better, it would be a whole lot better.
Nothing about that is distractions, right?
Yeah, that's right. Get my heads up. Okay, very good. Procedures for Public Records Act. Okay, thank you very much.
Decent trick.
Well, you don't need Barbara. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting on November 20th, 2018. It's a little bit after 9. The County Council will be here in a minute. But first, we'll rise and say the pledge, and afterwards, let's remain standing in remembrance of, the fire victims of in California, the loss of lives and homes and businesses, as well as gratitude to the first responders, volunteers, and professional firefighters who are trying to protect lives and property. Thank you. The pledge will be led this morning by Supervisor Medina.
Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion for acknowledgement of posting?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to presentations and recognitions. Seems like we don't have any today, so we'll just go on from there to public comment. Madam Clerk, do you have any cards?
I have no speaker cards.
No speaker cards? Would anyone like to address the Board of Supervisors on items not on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to department head announcements. CAO Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we do have a few announcements. I'd like to go ahead and highlight for the board a couple of things. One out of our clerk's office. wanted to make sure that the board is aware, and as well as the public and employees, that for public hearing, our notice, our date of notice would be by tomorrow. So I want to make sure everyone's aware of that due to the holidays for any public hearing. Additionally, out of the clerk's office, I wanted to mention that with regards to Public Request Act, the clerk of the board receives those. I want to make sure that the public is aware of that. Instructions are located on our website, and they handle actually all items and manage and maintain that. They've been doing a really, really good job. There's a document that the board has with instructions, as well as a flow chart in the back, and there's some in the back for the public to view. With regards to HR, I'd like to go ahead and highlight the health fair. It was a really good health fair that we had in October, and in light of that, there was a request to continue with training with regards to health and how we handle that. So we'll be sending an employees benefit survey coming out after Thanksgiving, and really try to educate the employees and what they can do to have better health for themselves, and also lowering our costs for health care. One additional item, classifications and compensation plan RFP. That'll be going out very soon. One of the items that we'll be looking at is meeting with the unions and some key staff and stakeholders. As soon as we do that, we'll move forward with that. So our goal is to have this out on the street before the end of the year.
Very good.
And I believe, let me double check my notes here. I think that's all the announcements, Mr. Chair. Actually, yeah, there's one announcement out of our budget office as well. We have Stuart, our budget officer.
Good morning, Board. I just wanted to highlight our bond financing and the process that we're taking for the jail and the behavioral health buildings. We've been working closely with KNN, who's our advisor, and Jones Hall, who's our bond counsel, to gather together financial information for our disclosure statement. This disclosure statement, along with a presentation, is going to be brought to one of the credit agencies in January. From that point, we are going to go through with the bond pricing, and then in February, we hope to close on the bonds to get the funds received. It's kind of been a collaborative effort with multiple departments. We had a training last week on the bond process. So everything's going smoothly, and we hope to receive those funds in February, which is definitely in line with the construction costs that we have for next year, starting construction on the behavioral health building, and then the finishing up of the jail expansion. Did you guys have any questions on that process?
That was very clear and straight to the point. I was curious as far as the progress and being able to meet those construction dates particularly for the behavioral health building. So I'm happy to hear that we're right on schedule. Any questions from the rest of the board? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I just wanted to make sure that, these are large wins. We're moving forward with a lot of projects and getting the proper financing. And our director from RMA will be soon presenting to you a status report of RMA, some of the projects and some of these other things that they've been accomplishing, some really good things.
Actually, Mr. Chair, Ray, on the, I know it's kind of doesn't relate to it, but it's more indirectly. Has the cost increased for the jail?
Yeah, I could probably invite the RMA director. I do know I did get a report from Adam recently that we are keeping our costs down. As you notice, we really haven't come before you. Almost every project in years past would come before you requesting more money. And that really is attributed to Vanner, to Adam, to to John. Again, that was my last report that I received. I believe it was 1%, somewhere around there. I don't know.
Right. I'm going to take the opportunity to brag on staff.
Yeah, please do.
And contractors. Ray's exactly right. So far, change orders have been held to 1%, which for a project like this is nothing short of miraculous.
Good job.
Yeah, I know. I looked into it last week, and I've been hugely impressed with everybody involved, and for the lack of change orders, because I know that was one of the areas of heartburn that this board had, going into it, and I actually see a building out there, so it's it's well done.
Yeah, I can tell you from my prior experience at the Sheriff's Office in Monterey County and this grant program and talking with other counties that are doing similar type projects, this is, in my experience, this is the example of how to do a jail expansion the right way. So
terrific. And
everyone else has had troubles.
And the jail will be complete next year.
And it's scheduled is on time as of right now.
Yeah. Fantastic. And then we can start the new building at Behavioral Health.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Right. We'll move on to board announcements. I'll start with Supervisor Rivas.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I just want to take this time to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Certainly hope everyone spends time with family and enjoys a safe holiday. But I also want to make a brief announcement that this is going to be my last meeting. And so I know we only have one meeting left, but this will be my last meeting. I'll be submitting my resignation to the CAO, and the resignation will basically be effective Friday, November 30th at 5 p.m. I'm very excited. On December 3rd, I'll be sworn into the state legislature. And so certainly learning all that, having spent so much time in Sacramento recently for training and whatnot, I learned that I'm not the only San Diego County supervisor that's ever served in the legislature. The last one that served was in 1901, believe it or not. So I'm excited to fill that gap over 100 and whatever years it is. But I am very excited to have this opportunity. This is my home. This is my home county. And so I, having grown up in Piscinas, where I lived in a migrant farm worker housing with my family, lived here in Hollister my entire life. And so I certainly want to thank the voters of District 3, the residents there, for the opportunity to serve you and to serve as a member of this board representing the 3rd District. This has been an incredible time in my life the last 8 years, having worked with incredible people on this board, with staff members, having talked about, challenging issues. And so certainly the opportunity that you gave me to be a representative is something I'll never forget, and it's been some of the best time that I've had. It wasn't only special for me, but for my family. And so thank you so much. It meant so much to my grandfather. I know when he died of cancer in 2011, before he died, he told me that he never thought that a county where he immigrated to in the 1960s, where he faced deplorable working conditions in the fields, he faced the discrimination. He never thought that a member of his family, let alone his grandchild, would ever have the opportunity to serve on the governing board for this same county. So it certainly meant a lot to him. I want to thank my colleagues on this board, Mark Medina, Margie Barrios, Jaime de la Cruz, Jerry Munzer, and Mr. Chairman, Anthony Patel. I've learned a tremendous amount from all of you. I'm certainly proud to have had the opportunity to learn from you and to work with you. I want to thank our staff, Ray Espinoza, Barbara Thompson. Staff has been incredible. Joe Paul Gonzalez, John Girton, the entire staff, Mary Lou, everyone, has been tremendous, and I wish you all the best. I'm certainly not going to go anywhere. I'm only going to be a phone call away, and I'll certainly be here all of the time. Because I'm very proud to have the opportunity to represent this region in Sacramento, but to really represent my hometown, to represent my home county. And so certainly having the opportunity to be a voice in Sacramento for all of you is something I'm very excited about, and certainly not going to rest or give up until our voice is heard in Sacramento. So thank you, Mr. CAO.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Okay, Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, too, want to wish everybody a safe and happy Thanksgiving. I know I'm very appreciative because I have in our family, we all are having good health. I made a joke at a church meeting that Carol and I were moving into the golden years. And I now understand what that means. It means you have to have a lot of gold to pay for all the doctors that you are constantly seeing. But I am very thankful that we are experiencing good health at the moment. Also, the CAO, Ray Espinoza, and I attended a joint operation board and policy board of the Monterey Bay Community Power. And as I reported out at the last meeting, the cities of San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay want to join the community power. Their boards passed a resolution. We were given a informational meeting, met with them, and the policy board will be meeting to vote on it on the 5th. And then I believe a new resolution changing the JPA will probably be coming before this board after the first of the year. So that's exciting because several of the other cities of San Luis Obispo are also considering joining the Monterey Bay Community Power. So not only are we financially doing very well early in its life, but it's expanding and people are wanting to join. Also, the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, AMBAG, celebrated its 50th year in operations last Wednesday also, and it was a great meeting and good celebration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Medina?
Nothing.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just some just quick comments and a note. First of all, I'd like to really thank the public and the Committee on G for doing a wonderful job for passing Measure G. We now have the ability to fix our roads, Highway 25. It's very important that we as the Board of Supervisors commit to the public that every single penny will be used for those roads. It's not going to be used for general fund. It's not going to be used for anything else but to fix our roads. That's a commitment that I make, and I hope the rest of the Board of Supervisors make, is that we're going to make sure that those dollars will be spent wisely, because this is once in a lifetime in which the Board of Supervisors, actually, the public trust on Measure G. And I especially want to congratulate Supervisor Botello, our chairman, for leading the Measure G. And I also want to thank the mayor, Ignacio Velasquez, for having the bold idea of pushing for the 1%. I remember the early discussions that we had. We're talking about 0.5%, 1/4%, 15 years, 10 years. And we as a COG decided to go with the 1% for 30 years. And I want to thank the public for entrusting us for voting for Measure G. And my commitment to the public is to make sure that every single penny is spent on our roads. Supervisor Rios, I want to congratulate you as our newly assembly member. It was a privilege working with you. You had a lot of ideas and directions, and we learned from you too. And I know that, when I go up to CSAC conferences, I'm going to go to your office, and I hope you have a sofa that says San Benito County on that sofa. I want to make sure of that. But I also have, as a supervisor, my first request, assembly member, and that is make sure that Highway 156 is built. We ask of you as San Benito County Board of Supervisors to make sure that that is on track. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, I have a bigger one than 156 because I know that's to be built, and it's funded. It's ready to go, especially with Prop 6 done. What we got to do is move Highway 25 up faster. Everybody on this board and on the two city councils, and we got to leverage our state representatives to help us move Highway 25. Caltrans, they had a deadline or set that it's to be 7 to 10 years. And when I was out campaigning for G, I didn't want to say anything off that message, but I really believe we could start sooner than that. And we'll do our best on our end to get our act together, and hopefully we get the support at the state level with you and Anna and some of your colleagues to help us navigate Caltrans and CTC. Anyway, I don't have a whole lot of report out other than I met with the Santa Clara Open Space Authority last week concerning the RCIS mapping plan and our response that we had back in March. They were, I think, feeling the county out as far as whether there was some flexibility on some of our comments for that program. And in the meeting was our CEO, Espinoza, Mr. Gurdon, County Council, and I think what they're going to do is come back to the board early part next year and kind of present, their perspective of our comments and whether or not we want to participate in that extension of their boundaries. And what I indicated to them at the time of the meeting last week was that we're stay with the comments of the responses of our letter to the Santa Clara Open Space Authority, and there certainly would be welcome to come before the board again. With that, I also want to congratulate Supervisor Rivas on his new opportunity up in Sacramento. I think San Bernardino County and our assembly district will be well represented. It's been great to work with you on the Board of Supervisors, and we're certainly going to miss your perspective, and hopefully your replacement will offer new ideas, of course. But we'll be checking in quite regularly with you. So with that, we'll move to the consent agenda. Would any supervisors like to pull any of the items?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull item 10.
Item 10. Okay. Anyone else? I'm going to pull and all three of them together, handle all three of them together is 14, 15, and 16. And anybody from the public? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the consent balance of the consent agenda.
A motion to approve amended consent.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Supervisor De La Cruz on item 10.
Yes, Kevin, you want to come to the podium, please?
Good morning.
Good morning. This type of relationship they're asking the board to approve, is it a common relationship?
It is. It's very common. All we're trying to do here is really put on paper what our roles and responsibilities and expectations are for each other in the event of a disaster. I'm sure, especially given the moment of silence we had at the beginning of this meeting, you're all aware of what's been going on with the Camp Fire and the Woolsey Fire down in Ventura County and Butte County. And I actually brought an attachment or a flyer for you to see how community foundations in those communities are working to help the victims of such major disasters. Many county Office of Emergency Services have these types of MOUs across the country. So this is us, like I said, putting on paper what our expectations are so that we don't have to worry about figuring out how to work together, what each of us are going to do in the event of a real disaster. When we had our flooding in 2017, we actually worked with the Community Foundation, and that's partially where this is coming from, so that we can hit the ground running, we can start working together, and we can get the victims of a disaster the support that they need. And this is actually going to be the first of many MOUs that are going to be seen by this board, where we are solidifying these relationships with NGOs in our county and with nonprofits so that we are better prepared to help support victims.
And it's not that I don't disagree. In fact, I agree, because sometimes nonprofits do a better job than government. I totally believe that. However, I do have some questions, and the first question is that is there going to be like a requirement that if an organization or group or someone gives money to the community foundation, that the nonprofit or the recipients will have to comply with some regulations? I just don't know what question to ask, but I just wonder: is there any requirements that will have to be done post receive funds?
By the victims of a disaster?
Yes.
No.
Done. So it's all straight out. We're going to help out. We're going to distribute the funds or clothing or items, and that's
exactly. A big problem we see in disasters, and this is absolutely happening with these two fires, is that when there's a disaster, people come out and they want to donate. They want to give clothes. They want to give toiletries. They want to give supplies, and that's actually a bad thing. The reason that's a bad thing is because these counties and cities who are experiencing a major disaster now have to contend with literally hundreds of tons of stuff. Used clothes, new clothes, open containers, and many times these supplies are already being provided by the Red Cross, the United Way, Salvation Army. So it's those monetary donations that go the farthest, and being able to funnel them through a organization such as the Community Foundation is really key for a county, especially for us at the Office of Emergency Services, because we don't have to set up any kind of fund. We don't have to accept as the county any kind of monetary or commodity donations. We're able to put it on the Community Foundation so that they can make sure that it goes to the people most in need.
Okay, and then my final question is, why Community Foundation? Why not the Red Cross or some other group?
So the Community Foundation is kind of a clearinghouse. So it's a one-stop shop for people to donate money, and the Community Foundation then, working with us, distributes the money to those nonprofits and NGOs that provide the service. In a disaster, everyone kind of has their piece. So the Red Cross is focused on care and shelter, providing short-term, possibly long-term housing solutions to people. The United Way focuses on clothing, supplies, your everyday supplies, toiletries, that kind of stuff. So everyone's kind of got a piece to this puzzle. But if we have one location, especially one that's located here, we can make sure that those dollars go to our disaster. If you think about 2017, the flooding, there was, I don't remember the exact number, but there was something like 56 of the 58 counties of California were impacted by the flooding, right? The widespread flooding across the state. If you donated to American Red Cross as a resident of San Benito County, there's no guarantee that that money is going to be spent to help the victims in San Benito County. However, with the Community Foundation, we do get that assurance that we're helping our neighbors here in this county.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Medina?
Nothing bad at all there. I just want to commend you for the job you're doing. You're being proactive rather than reactive. We're learning from people's mistakes throughout the state, and I greatly appreciate you taking the lead in something like this. And anything you need from us, please let us know. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, any comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Motion to approve MOU, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. I pulled 14, 15, and 16 all together, so I'm going to talk about all three of them together, if I can, Mr. Gerten. Probably for the first time in a long time, I see some progress on a number of our bridge projects, and I know that this is probably connected to the bridge projects. Is what you're thinking about on these three contracts?
Yes, sir. And actually, I'll be giving a big presentation a little bit later today about the entire bridge program. But this is for specialized right-of-way work related to the bridge projects and it's specialized work that we don't have right now. We don't have the training for in-house staff. And for some of you who've been here longer than I have, Supervisor Munzer can certainly back me up on this. Hospital Road Bridge, you'll all recall. I think the right-of-way acquisition for that took over 10 years to complete. We just completed that a few months ago. So it is a complex undertaking, and I would like to get staff is still involved in the process. This is just expertise that we don't currently have and would like to get in-house, but right now we don't have it.
Yeah, and that probably is true for like even item 12. And I was curious, though, like you said, you have a big presentation a little bit later on in the meeting. How wouldn't it have made, I don't know, sense to probably lump, these three into the later item as far as contracts being approved instead of separate items? I don't know. It just seemed like it could have been all handled within one agenda item, but that's just my gut feeling on it.
Yeah, they are indirectly related, so it wouldn't be inappropriate to do that, I don't think.
If you'd like to continue those items until after the bridge project, you can certainly bring those items back at a later time.
Okay. And could we use these contracts for other type of projects as well?
It's just for whatever, I haven't read specifically what's in here, but it's for these bridge projects that we currently have on the books.
Right. It's not.
There's three specifically.
Yeah, the contracts don't specifically limit it to the bridge projects. It's just the bridge projects right now that need the right-of-way acquisition, but could be used for similar type projects, especially now that we have Measure G coming, and we'll be doing larger road projects going forward. Mm-hmm. This would help with those projects as well, if necessary.
Yeah, because I think we had a meeting with Caltrans last week as well. I forgot to mention that, but maybe some of that could be used for other projects as well. And one last question: when you have three contractors under contract for this amount of money, do you kind of cost, check the bids as far as what they would bid within the contract, or are you just,
So the rates that they would charge were part of the RFP and part of this contract. And then going forward, as projects come up, we would do what we call a task order, and we hold them to the prices that are in the contract.
Okay.
Yeah. And then also, as the CAO has been teasing for the last couple of meetings, at the next board meeting, we'll be talking more about the coming year and strategies for staffing and moving forward with the RMA structure. And part of that will be how we continue to integrate consultant services as necessary, but get the staff that we have and get new staff the training that we need to have this type of expertise in-house. And right now the consultants are helping with that. They're helping to train staff on some of these really specialized skills and knowledge that hasn't been in-house traditionally. But I'll be talking more about that at the next board meeting.
Great. I appreciate that. That's just what answers all my questions. Supervisor Munzler.
So having been frustrated for the full time I've been on this board with the Hospital Road Bridge, with John Smith Road realignment, whatever we need to do to get these projects moving forward, I would totally support. If this is going to we're going to delay these three items till after we hear the presentation and the regular agenda, I'm fine with that. But I certainly would not want to see these not get approved today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none. Any comments from the public? All right. I'll come back and make a motion to approve item consent agenda 14, 15, and 16 per staff recommendation.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to regular agenda. CAO Espinoza, item 19.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to go ahead and invite up our management analyst, Dulce Alonso. And I want to first open up by saying thank you to Dulce Tavin from RMA, from John's group, as well as Sarah from legal. They worked exceptionally hard on this to try to get this done this year. I know that the board had requested us to move forward with that and to provide this information to you today and try to get this done this year. So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and pass this off to Dulce. She's going to go ahead and intro this item. This is cannabis within our county and the ordinance with that. So she's going to give you a high-level review, and then we'll hand it off to our consultant.
Thank you, Ray. Good morning, board, and congratulations, Mr. Rivas. So I want to begin by giving you an overview of how all the ordinances work together to the stage where we are now. So we split up the regulatory ordinances for cannabis into three main sections. One being the where what activity can be done. That's covered in Ordinance 25. The second is the how the land use and facility standards will be addressed. And then the third is 7.02, which is our main focus today as we're introducing the ordinance, and it's the who and the how of the business and the people. And public input will be heard through a conditional use permit that will be facilitated through planning. And then the county has worked with HDL companies to create this regulatory program. So to begin the timeline, December 12th of this year, 7.02 was initially adopted, and this currently prohibits any cannabis activity in San Benito County. However, in June of this year, voters approved Measure C, allowing the county to tax cannabis business. Since then, in July, we contracted with HDL companies, and they have helped in the development and implementation of a cannabis regulatory program. September, we brought a brief overview of 7.02, and since then we've modified it where our staff feels comfortable, where we're at, and taken three ordinances instead of just the one. On November 14th, we had a public hearing at the Planning Commission where we brought forth the three ordinances, and we were there quite late, and we went through the entire ordinance, and they did make some recommendations. And then bring us to today, we're going to be introducing Chapter 7.02, and going forward, we're going to do a public hearing for all three ordinances on December 11th. And here's a visual of kind of the three components that are put into this. It's a zoning, which will really address the where, what activities can be done in what zones. I have a map to kind of show you a big picture of what activities would be allowed. And then that's covered in Title 25. Then we have Chapter 19.43, which is the development standards and the land use. So this will be applicable to setbacks, very specific things with facilities, and then we have 7.02, which is our main focus today, which will be the business, the people, more of the regulatory owners and employees. So together, these three kind of mesh together to oversee the cannabis program. And so in addition to our regulatory program, cannabis businesses will be required to also obtain a state license in conjunction with our county permit. So the six main activities that we're addressing with these ordinances are here. The first is cultivation, which is solely allowed indoor. and mixed lighting, and we're limiting that to 50 permits. Then we have manufacturing, which is the extraction or infusion of cannabis products, and this includes volatile and involatile products, and we have no limit on these. Then we have the laboratory testing, which must be accredited by the state, and we also have no limit on this. Distribution is business to business. Transportation of state licensed cannabis products. And then we have micro business, which a micro business must encompass at least 3 of the business activities in order to get this type of permit. We are allowing delivery for out of county jurisdictions because we have no retail within the unincorporated area of San Benito County. So we're going to be amending Chapter 7.02 to regulate cannabis businesses to address these activities. And here's the map, the zoning map. And what I want to highlight is what activities will be allowed in what areas. So we have cultivation, which will be allowed in AP, which is the lighter green you see here. AR is the darker green. CM is not shown on this map, but there's also M1 and M2. M1 is the light blue, and M2 is the purple on here. And then the 4 other businesses, micro business, distribution, lab testing, and manufacturing, those will be allowed in M1, which is the light blue, and M2, which is the purple. And there's a few different shades of purple, but it's the darker purple you see before you. Okay, so I'm just going to read the title, and then Tim will go more into detail on 7.02. But it's an ordinance of the Board of Supervisors of the County of San Benito, amending Chapter 7.02 of the San Benito County Code regulating cannabis businesses. So we have Tim here. I apologize. Who will discuss in more detail 7.02. And any questions for me?
Any questions from the board? No? Very good.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make one correction. It is going to be an ordinance of the Board of Supervisors of the County of San Benito amending Chapter 7.02 of the San Benito County Code relating to cannabis businesses.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so I just have to pull one thing up.
tinkering around the margins probably for the next decade, and local ordinances will have to be updated and changed to reflect those changes. One of the key things pending right now is the pending change on deliveries. So in terms of the application evaluation process, we won't go into too much detail. It has 3 components, which is a departmental evaluation, public hearing, and a competitive evaluation process. Your departmental evaluation consists of the board adopting a procedure guideline and selection criteria for these businesses, providing the grounds on which the top applicants in each category of cannabis business type, so that's cultivation, distribution, retail, etc., and they shall be evaluated in a final determination by the county, the CAO, or his designee. Now, the public hearing is a separate process. The purpose of it is to solicit feedback from residents and businesses and give the community in general a chance to be heard. That is very important in this area. At least 10 days prior to the public hearing, notice will go out to all property owners within 300 feet of the proposed business locations to be considered by the CAO. The competitive evaluation process will be conducted if the number of eligible applications for each activity exceeds the maximum number that are allowed under the ordinance. You've got to have some means of weeding out candidates that are less qualified. Applicants will be scored and ranked by a third party appointed by the board, and with that person recommending issuance of the cannabis business permit to the highest ranked eligible applicants. Now, a cannabis business issued by the county will be absolutely required. That is a key feature of this regulatory process. No one will be able to operate a cannabis business without obtaining all 3 of the following, and this is per state law. First, a valid local cannabis permit. Second, a state license. And third, a valid state of California seller's permit issued by the State Department of CDTFA, Tax and Fee Authority, which is the successor to the Board of Equalization. A prerequisite of the state license is a criminal background check. That is another critical part of the regulatory process. In terms of business procedures, in addition to the application evaluation process, the ordinance includes procedures for denial, non-renewal, suspension, or revocation of the permit. In addition, there is a section on appeal procedures to make sure that due process is observed if you're talking about taking away someone's ability to conduct this type of business. Now, the employee work permit is going to be required for all employees of cannabis businesses. Volunteers will not be permitted. The rationale for this is, first of all, to impose accountability so that you are dealing with a known universe of workers, to control access to the cannabis facilities, and the fact that a key driver of product loss throughout the industry traditionally has been employee theft. So if everyone's registered, you know who you're dealing with. So the features of the work permit: a criminal background check will be required. It'll be valid for 1 year. It expires 1 year from the date of issuance unless suspended or revoked by the county prior to that time. The county may suspend or revoke if the employee, once the permit is issued, is convicted of specified offenses, which are listed in the ordinance. And the employee will have a right of appeal under the procedures laid out in the ordinance. The application, the permit, and all other fees will be set by the Board of Supervisors by resolution. The goal of all fees will be 100% cost recovery. This is in part so that you're not siphoning off money from the general fund that you hadn't anticipated. It's also to help ensure that any local tax on cannabis can be allocated in an unfettered fashion without having to backfill your regulatory costs. No cannabis business permittee can continue operations until and unless the fees are timely paid. The fees and costs shall be deemed a debt to the County of San Benito, recoverable via the authorized administrative process. This ordinance will expressly limit the county's liability to the fullest extent possible under the law with respect to any complications arising from the fact that a business permit has been issued or otherwise authorizing a commercial cannabis business to operate in the county. It includes a finding by the Board of Supervisors that the ordinance is exempt from CEQA. That is going to be helpful. In general, your regulatory ordinance is going to cover hours of operation, location, signage and advertisement requirements, physical security, sight, smell, and noise, which tend to trigger nuisance complaints if they are not well regulated and controlled by the business, reporting requirements, employee badge requirements, which will go along with the employee work permit, unpermitted construction activities, how to handle vendors and consultants and their ingress and egress from the cannabis businesses, access control requirements so that you have a specified protocol for who's allowed on the premises, law enforcement access, record reporting requirements, and this has to do with both business records and inventory records and movement of cash. This is predominantly a cash business, so all these protocols will cover those three areas. Next, investigation and inspection protocols, good neighbor policy, which is really going to be in part closely intertwined with what's being done to control odor and other nuisance factors, suspension, fines, and revocation of the permit. Obviously, as I mentioned before, a criminal background check, and to the extent that it continues to be allowed under state law, regulation of deliveries. I'll just briefly walk you through the application process for these businesses. The application submittal is, the first part is a preliminary determination of eligibility. There's going to be a business application, live scan, which is a criminal background request, and indemnification agreement. So each owner will have to agree to indemnify the city for any claims arising out of the fact that the permit has been issued, as well as a zoning verification letter, which is a preliminary finding by the city that the location, the proposed location, is in compliance with your zoning requirements. There will be county staff reviews for completeness, and applicants with complete applications will move on to phase 2. Obviously, there's going to be a fee for this, which is to be determined. That will be set by the board by resolution. HDL, the proposal is for us to review the applications and score them based on 5 categories. Location, business plan, which will include things like the degree to which they're capitalized, what are their startup costs, do they have sufficient capital or access to capital to cover those startup costs, neighborhood compatibility, the safety plan, which is physical security as well as evacuation procedures, what to do in emergencies, handling of hazardous waste, and the security plan, which has to do with the physical integrity of the structure, how secure it is, do they have sufficient surveillance camera coverage, ingress and egress procedures, things of that nature. And what's the protocol for keeping the facility secure both during business hours and after hours? The applicant's score will be based on their ability to meet or exceed the requirements in each category. Those who score 80% or higher, which is the standard that will guarantee they will be issued a state license, will advance to phase 3. Then there's a second scoring process, which involves a selection committee, representatives from the county administrative office, the RMD, finance department, and county sheriff. HDL would facilitate the interviews, and we review many of the same factors the committee would that were mentioned earlier. Applicants then continue to, if they receive a score of 80% or higher, they continue to phase 4. This is the public meeting and county administrator final selection process. The community will be allowed to present concerns and or support. The public meeting will not determine which applicants receive permits, but it is in part an opportunity to give the community notice that these businesses are going to be located in the community and in certain particular areas, to give them an opportunity to be heard. This is still a somewhat controversial issue in a lot of communities, and you want, if nothing else, the businesses as well as the residents have got to feel like they've had an opportunity to be heard. The selection committee will then conduct final review and evaluation. They reserve the right to request or obtain additional information from any applicant as necessary, because that's often the case. Sometimes it's an issue of a criminal background check that may be needed for an owner that wasn't initially listed in the documentation, or the fact that they need to submit further proof of capitalization. It could be any number of things. The selection committee will then make a recommendation to the county administrator or his designee. CAO will then make the final determination to move applicants on to the CUP process. So at that point, the land use process would begin. There are permit fees of several of them. Again, cost recovery is the goal. The applicants would pay separate fees according to each phase. The provisions allow nominal fee adjustments on a yearly basis to cover increases in expenses. And there's ongoing monitoring and enforcement costs for cannabis businesses. That, too, should be part of the fee structure. Now, the cannabis employee badges, that's part of the employee work permit process. That's going to be a badge issued to every individual working in a cannabis business. They must all be at least 21 years of age. And they would include contracted employees as well as those who are on the payroll full-time. Background check and live scan would be required. They've got to have them on while they're on the premises, and they're valid for 1 year. This is basically a recap of the 4 phases that I described earlier. I won't go into detail about this, but I'll be happy to take questions. This is a flow chart, just conceptually demonstrating what the process looks like, at what point specific factors are focused on: taxation and permit fees initially, the interview panel selection, training, going on through the various phases until the application process is complete. That concludes the presentation. I will be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cromartie. Any questions from the Board of Supervisors?
In general?
Medina?
Just in general questions? Okay, I'll get straight to the meat here. When we're looking at shared wells, shared water wells, is there anything we can put into the ordinance that states if it's a shared water well that the individuals need to have a written permission from the other people sharing the water wells?
I believe that's covered in the land use ordinance 19.43.
I didn't see anything like that.
There's a water plan requirement.
Yes, that was the water plan requirement dealt with the 1-to-1 ratio. It dealt with how much water they will be using, but it doesn't talk about, for instance, let's just say that I shared a water well with several people, and I used a lot more water, and it put a lot of stress on the system. So when I'm looking at this is who is going to fix that water well?
So I'm going to jump in here a little bit.
Or is it legally that we need to stay away from that? That's another question.
Well, in Chapter 19.43, which will come before the board on December 11th, there's going to be a requirement that goes before the Planning Commission when you're talking about a conditional use permit for what type of facility. And that's going to be looking and factoring into all of the individual and unique situations occurring on the property, if there's a shared well or not. And so certainly there can be conditions of approval that would be required. So if there's a shared well situation, but the type of use on the land requires there to be an individual well for that cannabis business activity, that can be something that would come before the Planning Commission as a condition of that CUP.
Okay.
Can I just add in general, and that's probably the most detailed and the best answer you're going to get on that. I didn't develop 19.4. I didn't work on it, but I do know that any cultivation operation is required by state law to identify its water source. And it follows at the local level that if there's an issue about a particular water source in terms of whether the applicant has legal access to that water, then it would seem to be a reasonable additional condition to impose on the land use permit.
And then the second one is similar. It's dealing with the landscaping. I think that was in Section 19.
I'm sorry, did you say landscaping?
Landscaping on Section 19.43.050.
That also is something that's going to be coming before this board on December 11th. So if there's questions about those specifically, they were provided as background to give context to this board, because otherwise the business regulatory program doesn't quite make sense without those backup materials. So certainly those questions I would ask to come in December.
And then the last one is dealing with Section 7.02.070, denial, non-renewal, suspension, or So when I'm looking at it here, number one, any person who, as of January 1st, 2019, engages in commercial cannabis activity in the County of San Benito in violation of local or state law. What about the people that, and I know in number 3, I believe it was, it said any person issued a notice or noncompliance for engaging in unlawful commercial cannabis activity in violation of San Benito County Code and or other laws, codes, or requirements in which they fail to timely discontinue the unlawful activity. In 2018, we've asked everybody to cease any type of marijuana growing in our county. So that would cover the people that did not stop growing marijuana in the county. Is that fair to say, Sarah?
That's intended to, yes.
Because it's the only reason I'm looking at it is because it says January 2019. Can we change that, or does that have any say in that? Being that it really was in 2018 where we...
Well, I believe the intent is that once you have the regulatory structure in place, which would take effect presumably on January 1st, after that point, anyone who has not yet been issued a permit or who has previously been served a notice by the sheriff to cease and desist, for example, retail operations, they can be unilaterally shut down because they are not in compliance with local ordinance. That's basically all that means.
Okay. That would be the 3 questions I had.
Okay. Supervisor De La Cruz.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you explain a little bit more on this? Would include any additional regulations imposed by the CEO or his designee? What other additional regulations?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the state law in this area is the regulatory structure is largely settled, but they are going to be tinkering with it for years. There are going to be a number of bills every year, I guarantee you, having to do with cannabis regulation. Many of them may seek to curtail or change local authority. For example, there is a pending regulation at the state level right now, which the state has signaled it intends to proceed with, although it's not yet official, which would take away local ability to prohibit cannabis deliveries in your jurisdiction. Now, an example of what additional regulation may be required is the following. The bare wording of the regulation clearly strips local governments of the ability to prohibit deliveries. It is silent and at best ambiguous on whether local governments can regulate those deliveries. In other words, hours of operation, places of delivery, whether you can impose a permit requirement, whether you can require a background check, things of that nature. And to the degree that things of that nature need to be fleshed out, it is incumbent upon local governments to craft those regulations and submit them for approval. In an effort to be proactive, HDL has proposed at a minimum that notwithstanding the removal of the authority to ban deliveries, that there at least be a minimal regulatory process regarding deliveries that may occur within the county. And that would consist of a permit requirement, which we think is reasonable and consistent with public safety, verification that the delivery service is linked to a licensed retail, a state licensed retail business, which is simply consistent with state law. And third, that a criminal background check has been conducted of whatever drivers are doing to the deliveries. We think those are minimalist and regulations at the local level that would be consistent with public safety.
So what you're saying is that means that our CEO will have unilateral powers to implement these regulations from the state, or it has to come to the Board of Supervisors?
In an abundance of caution, they should be approved by the Board of Supervisors.
That was I should have rephrased the question that way.
But they would be proposed by your CAO, yes.
Got it. And then my next question, Mr. Chair, you talk about 80% or higher to move to the next phase, and I see that phase 1, phase 2, it seems like it's pretty much objective. Phase 3, otherwise, on the other case, there might be some subjective opinions or views on the selection process. I just have a concern that once it reaches the third phase, that not a single application will reach 80%. I just have a concern for that.
Well, there's no reason necessarily to think that. I mean, there is a point at which it becomes somewhat subjective, because particularly if you have multiple applicants and more applicants than you have slots for retail businesses, for example. But the 80% is meant to be a cutoff to determine who is qualified and able to operate in a regulated business environment.
Right. We all want that.
That's the goal. That's what you want.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that they need expertise in operating a cannabis business, so long as they've been able to bring in that expertise to help them. But you want someone who's familiar with the permitting process, or that they've demonstrated an ability to comply with business regulations. They can work with local government as well as law enforcement. Those are the things that you're looking for with that 80%. And in many jurisdictions, there has not been, for the most part, any problem with finding folks who can meet the grade.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Sometimes you have relatively few, but there's always some folks who basically constitute the cream of the applicant pool.
Any other questions from the board? Before I open it up to public comment, I'm going to give the opportunity to our elected and appointed department head leaders if they want to comment on this. I know, speaking with the sheriff yesterday, myself, Captain Taylor's here, and he has a statement from the sheriff's office. I'll invite him right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board. Congratulations again. Just a couple quick things from our office. So I just think it should please the board to hear that our office has been working very cooperatively with staff. We've been involved in the process. We've been included. We feel we've had a voice, and we appreciate that very much. And we want to be a partner going forward. So in 2 weeks, you're going to be voting whether or not to adopt this ordinance and allow the cannabis industry to operate here in our community. Though the ordinance has taken shape in what we feel is a reasonable direction, we still wish to communicate to you some observations focusing on matters of just of public safety. So oversight of a program of this magnitude will require, in our opinion, additional staffing at the sheriff's office. So as part of this process, we're interested to see if there's a staffing plan for this program and a date in which the funding would be available to hire any additional staff that's deemed necessary to help with this program. The second thing is the health of this now lawful industry will be directly impacted by our ability to, for lack of a better term, squash the illegitimate businesses or illegitimate activity. So our focus would be more on being able to have an impact on the illegitimate, illegal activity, as opposed to be a thorn in the side of the legal operators. And I guess the best way for me to try to explain that is, if you're working in an industry where you're handling money every single day, dollar bills, cash money's passing through your hands every day, it's a little easier to detect when something counterfeit comes through your hands, just based on the feel, the look, because you're dealing with it and you're intimately involved with it every single day. So our office is just looking to mirror kind of what the city's already doing, which is be involved in the process, be involved with the applicants. It was even brought up by our consultant about the necessity for permitting the work and the employees that are going to work there, so that you know them, you know their background, you know their history, you know how they're doing, and so we just want to be able to be part of that process because we feel if we're familiar with the compliant industry, we'll be able to quickly identify the non-compliant industry. And then the other public safety concern would be the potential increase in cannabis usage is the potential for more impaired motorists on the road. Currently, there's no reliable, accurate technology to determine impairment from THC. It's something that law enforcement professionals in our nation are hoping to see some effective tools coming soon, but we just want to be aware that that is a concern of our office for impairment, but that we appreciate you listening. We appreciate being part of the process. We're eager to still be a partner as this moving forward in a positive direction, and just wanted to bring a couple things to your attention, so I appreciate you listening.
Very good. Any questions for Captain Taylor? Thank you. Director Riding Sword.
Good morning. First of all, Supervisor Rivas, in 5 years, I have found you to be a man of values and honor, and I appreciate that. On this issue, the legislature, as you probably are aware, also recognized that there may be public health issues involved in the use of marijuana, just as we monitor other kinds of things that people put in their body. So I just want to ask the board and the county just to kind of be aware of taking a look at that. I believe they actually have put money into the bills for public health. So just to be aware that we need to also think about not only use in law enforcement, but public health in this issue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other department heads want to comment on this before I open it up to public comment? Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add one thing, because Supervisor De La Cruz had a question that I wanted to address specifically. He had asked if the CAO had authority with regard to implementing regulations for the program, and I did want to address that there is a provision that's written into the ordinance right now in which authority would be delegated to the CAO to make regulations to implement the program. Now, it also says that the Board of Supervisors, could be making these regulations and setting them by resolution or ordinance. So I wanted to make sure that was clear to you, and I can tell you specifically which provision that's in if you'd like to see it. That is section 7.02.040, subdivision C, which is on page 458 of your packet, page 13 of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'll open it up for public comment. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, I have one. Peter Brazil.
Morning, Board, Chair, Supervisors, staff. Again, my name is Peter Brazil. I'm an attorney for JRG, representing multiple clients in the county. First off, I would like to thank all of you, staff, the board, HDL now, who's been involved lately, but this has been a process that started, at least in my involvement, back in 2016 when the first moratorium or urgency ordinance was put in place, through the application process for amortization, through that whole process, through the redevelopment of the ordinance once and then twice. It's been a long road. I think what you have before you is a kind of a culmination of all of that work. There are two things I want to address in this because I think overall the ordinance is really good. It's addressed a lot of the concerns that were voiced both by public comment at the Planning Commission level and before the board over these last 2 years. The first one has to be a subject that I've addressed more than once. It has to do with the permit maximums. You've put no maximums on any of the permits except for cultivation. Cultivation is unique as far as a permit goes in this process because you will not find operators needing multiple distribution permits, testing permits. They only need one to make their operation work. Cultivation is vastly different. Take it from me, I've done plenty of applications where we're looking at site plans, trying to design how the permits will fit within there. You can pretty much completely ignore the Type 2 medium license because one of those within your operation is a poison pill for acquisition and merger and everything else because you can only have one of them. So we advise all our clients to stick with the 10,000 square foot max permit, which is the smalls, and then use the incremental smaller ones. If your greenhouse is 15,000 square foot, you'll need two of them to satisfy that rather than getting a 22 and merge under that. Next, cultivation is also one of these things where we're seeing the wholesale price drop. So just like in regular agriculture, you're going to need to scale, which means you'll need to at least get to a decent size to compete with anybody. The second issue I wanted to bring up was actually, I didn't think anybody would bring it up, but Supervisor Medina did bring it up, and this has to do with the denial process. And the only reason I brought this up is because I was so involved in the amortization hearings. And there's language in here in these previously mentioned 7.02.07. It comes into two different sections, A3 and B6, where they say, essentially it's the same language, that when there's a noncompliance, a notice of noncompliance issued, that they failed to timely discontinue the unlawful activity. All I wanted to do was make sure that there was a consideration here that this included the exhaustion of remedies which were provided under the amortization. This means the right to argue before you voluntarily cease your operation, that you were able to argue your amortization rights. To just cease your operations voluntarily and argue it after the point destroys the business and makes the argument almost moot. And so I was just trying to make sure, because I had many of my clients, we went through the amortization process, and a strict interpretation of this would prohibit them from operating here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brazil.
I have no other speaker cards.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Board of Supervisors. Elia Salinas. There was a couple of things that I wanted to mention, and one of the things is a separate phase of going through a work permit is kind of actually adding more work and fees. I mean, the City of Hollister has done a great job, and what they've done is they have you have to go through a background check in order to work for any kind of a business. So you don't need a work permit. You just need to pass the background check, and then they issue you an ID card that gives you access to the facility. And I don't know about it having to be renewed again. It doesn't have to be renewed again, so you don't have to go and pay annually. If you lose your job, obviously. The cards belong to the city; they don't belong to the employee. So you can carry it when you're working at the facility, and then once you terminate at the business, then it belongs to the city. It's got to be turned back into the city. So I don't think we need to go through that extra step. The police department and the sheriff's department is already going to be on top of that. The other thing is with regards to having another. Going through another process for delivery. You don't need to. They've already gone through the background check. They've already got a state license. I think what you should do, and what I've done within the City of Hollister, is there is a delivery. I made them go down there, and they got a business license. They went and got that. They went and got a fictitious business name, and they filed and then they had to report themselves to the police department, showing all their identifications, knowing that they are licensed, and they actually showed their applications for what they filed for the state. So I would request that the same thing have to happen with the city instead of having. With the county, I'm sorry. They've got to come to the county, get a business license, and do the whole steps and report themselves to the sheriff's department. I don't think we need to do an extra step and another permit. It's not required, but we could get fees from them because they would be doing business in the county, and they would have to get their business license. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Board. It's interesting. After 2.5 years, I finally find myself agreeing with something Mr. Brazil said in the fact that HDL, I want to commend you on behalf of the citizens of this community that you produced a fine product, and I think it's something that, although I've been on the other side of this subject for some time on a number of issues, I think what you have before you, for the most part, is a really good product, and you should be proud that you did your investigation to hire the right company to do the right job. A couple of things that I would sort of like to mention is I sort of disagree about the number of permits. I think when you think about 50 in an area of cultivation only, when you think about 50 cultivation permits, and I'm really glad you listened to the Planning Commission about the scenic highway issue. If you want to know what probably the security issues are going to look like around cultivation, drive down Santa Ana Road about 100 feet from Cary Avenue and see what the situation is and the security that PG&E has around their pipeline building. That's pretty much what you're going to need to protect the marijuana product in cultivation. And why is that important? I mentioned earlier at the Planning Commission that for the last 3 years I've volunteered at the National Park and a preventive search and rescue team. And part of my duties is to make contact with visitors that come from all over the United States and all over the world. And oftentimes, the conversation leads to, what do I do after I finish hiking? Where do I go? We talk about the wineries. We talk about visiting downtown Hollister, San Juan. They ask me, well, what's your favorite restaurant? For different types of food. So I think you have a duty to protect and enhance our current tourism in this county. And by providing a fairly strong screening process to protect our scenic highways is important. I think you hit that. And it's important as people drive into our communities down Highway 25 and Fairview Road and Cienega that they're not going to see security situations like what we see at PG&E. That's the last thing you want, is people to drive by razor wire and cameras and be able to visually see that and have an idea about what the heck is going on here. So I think we have a duty not only to do that for our tourism industry, but you should consider the screening policies and procedures for surrounding neighbors in these rural areas. They deserve that same kind of protection, not to go out of their backyard and see 300 feet away razor wire, cameras, and lights. So that's just food for thought. My last thing is, I think it's really important, out of fairness, you're going to have 2 new supervisors on this board. And one of them just resigned today. I think it's important to at least allow the new supervisors a chance to take a look at this and have feedback on the ordinance, basically for the benefit of their constituents. The constituents are going to ask them about this in the future for 4 years, and if you don't allow them an opportunity to have input, they're not going to have a good answer, because they're going to say, well, that happened before me, a month before me. So I think you should allow at least one meeting next year for the new supervisors to have input on this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to address the board?
I can pull my speaker card.
I don't think you probably don't even need one.
Hello, board, supervisors. Thank you, Robert Rivas, for your time in serving our community. And I'm definitely proud that we have one of our locals representing us. And to Jerry, thank you for your time of service that you had here. I know it's been a long road. I just want to thank my community. Ultimately, when it comes to this ordinance, there's a lot for me to definitely learn. One of the things that has resonated with me, I've had short conversations with Ray about it, is the reality of the tourism. I think it's a huge benefit. I think I'm showing up to different meetings right now. I'm learning a lot. I went to the Pinnacle Gateways meeting, and one of the things they definitely emphasized is they don't have a problem with visitors. They have tons of visitors. What they have a problem with is what do those visitors have to enjoy, and ultimately they get turned away because that place is so full at times that they really can't enjoy that park. It's an opportune time, I think, in that sense, for us to come up with a game plan to really capitalize on those individuals that are coming from outside of our community to benefit. And I agree with Steve Becerra that we have to be very careful in the way that we implement it. It's not anti-cannabis, it's about pro-tourism. How do we enhance and protect the beauty that we already have? The Pinnacle Gateways is very focused on the conservation and on protecting that beautiful environment that we have. And I know part of this ordinance addresses the prime ag land. I know that when it comes to cannabis, there's obviously, that you use a lot of water. I'm still trying to understand the pesticide element of it, but at the end of the day, there's a lot to protect, and there's a lot of beauty that we have. And I'd like to make sure that when we move forward with this, I'd love to weigh in on it and to learn more, so that way I definitely have an answer for my constituents, and ultimately for us to be able to have a win-win where community benefits and the cannabis starts in a way that the whole community can accept. So thank you for your time, and again, thank you for you guys' service, for Robert and Jerry.
Thank you, Supervisor-elect Hernandez.
Mr. Chair, Peter, just want to say congratulations on your election results.
Thank you.
And looking forward to working with you next year.
Thank you, Supervisor De La Cruz. And thank you, Anthony. I know we've had a short time to talk also. Mm-hmm. And Mark Medina, I can't wait to sit with you guys and work together.
Yeah. Look forward to next year. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charlie Bedolla with the Holster Fire Department, the fire marshal, and I'd just like to support what Sheriff Taylor had to say about the cannabis facility and the regulations and enforcing it. It does take more personnel, so if there's a way we can get in there to get some more personnel on it. It's a full-time job for me trying to regulate and to make sure these facilities are safe for the employees and the public. They're constantly improving and stepping up their abilities from non-volatile to volatile, and we're trying to make them as safe as we can as possible. One of the facilities, just letting you know, I thought was the safest facility around, and we ended up having an incident where we did have a fire, where they did have a mishap. So it's important, and we're starting to move towards, there's no codes for California for the cannabis facility, so we're utilizing what's Denver's doing, so we're starting to bring that, and they do have to register with like Monterey Air Quality Control for items that are going out into the air. Environmental health is a big player in this one, so we've brought them into there because they're stepping up from their F1 fabrication to their H2s, just because they're stepping it up so fast and so hard that we're having to try to catch up and stay on there. So I do recommend that we do figure out a staffing to help support it with I know with police and fire, because I'm constantly out there. It's a full-time job, just trying to regulate them and keep them compliant and keep them safe and keeping them all consistent the same. We're not holding anyone different, or we're just all trying to keep them all the same. So that's what I was, if we get staffing for that, that would be great too, for everyone.
Supervisor Medina?
Just to let you know, sorry about that. I was a big advocate of Measure C, and I just grabbed up the ordinance reading the, it passed, of course, and it states right here is all revenues from this tax will be deposited into the county's general fund and may be used for general county governmental services, including but not limited to law enforcement, fire, emergency response, street maintenance and pothole repair, health services, parks, library services, economic development, and affordable housing. So it is my intention to make sure that when we receive these dollars that we do come up with a plan and allocate these monies accordingly. So thank you.
Yeah, and just so you know, the team that we've probably established, there's like a building official, there's a planning official, there's environmental health, there's fire, and then there's PD. So we've kind of stopped going individually, and we usually go as a team, and it's going to take a full-time team to help regulate, especially with this amount of permits that are going up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Noble, you can't speak unless you have a yellow slip of paper.
As a matter of fact, Charlie delivered mine.
Oh,
She didn't read it, but my name was on the card Charlie delivered. Jason Noble from Trespinos. I'd like to take a moment to go back to something that Supervisor Medina had stated. And I am a real estate broker, which means I'm a property right advocate. And when it comes to well water, I think it's important to differentiate that many well agreements will specifically state in shared wells that they are intended for domestic usage only, not for irrigation. As the gentleman from HDL had mentioned, that part of the process is demonstrating that you have water for your project. Irrigation wells are a whole nother matter, which irrigation wells also typically have written agreements as far as for usage and maintenance and repairs. There are some older agreements in the county that just demonstrate that you have an interest in a well. Supervisor Munzer and I happen to share a neighbor that grows wine grapes. I don't drink wine, but I don't begrudge him a right to take water for growing of his ag commodity, which I think this is quickly becoming that cannabis is an ag commodity, and because of the dollars generated, it's of a specific interest to the county. For that reason, I would just ask that you don't trample on people's water rights. If I have an interest in a well, if I have a right to take water, that you don't tell me I can't because I'm using it for this specific use. But as he mentioned, if there's a written agreement that says it's for domestic purposes only, well, that would preclude them and quite possibly necessitate them drilling their own well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'll close the public comment period and bring it back to the board for further comments. Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ray, I mean, we had a member of the sheriff department, a member of the fire department come here, and even actually Jim from Health and Human Services asking for more staffing. And then we have Measure C, which passed. Thank God it passed. I can foresee already the pressure, asking you to ramp up the staff. I have a concern because that concern is that I don't want to use general fund money to fill these positions. I'll be honest with you. But we do have a mechanism in which we can generate revenue to offset these staffing levels. And so I guess I guess that's the best way I can say it is I'm telling you, I guess that's the best way. I know it's rude, but I have to say it the way I feel, is that I will not support you coming to the Board of Supervisors in the near future and asking us to fund staffing levels with general fund until we know that there's going to be money available and money's going to come in. And I know that someone from the public asked that the fees be dropped to be competitive. And if we are going to go in that direction to consider dropping fees, we need to also take in consideration that we've been put on notice by the sheriff, the fire, and all the other departments that they want more staffing. And so we can't drop one fee and then provide the staffing level that's required. So I have concerns on that, and I guess that's why we hire you to take care of those issues and come to the board and present the best option available for us. But I just won't support general fund money being allocated. The intention of Measure C and the creating of this ordinance is to become, at a minimum, self-sufficient, at a minimum. So I want to make sure that, you get that, right?
CEO?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and like any business, a startup business, there has to be some initial investment. And I know that we budgeted for that this year, hiring HDL and moving forward with at least getting this plan together. With that, there comes fees associated with this as well as taxes. So that's the plan, is to make sure that those funds are utilized for the hiring, monitoring, and maintaining this particular thing that we talked about with regards to cannabis and the ordinance. But with that, we have some money that we have initially invested into this to get this moving forward. And the goal administratively is to make sure that this is self-sufficient, not utilizing general funds.
Okay,
that's the plan.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Chair, one more question. And thank you, Ray. That provides some comfort. Mr. Chair, I guess I'm asking a question from your perspective. Is 50 applicants the correct procedure, or maybe do a 50 operators instead of just 50 permits?
Yeah, I know that's a question that I had too, as far as what we were. It's 50 permits. CEO, I know we've kicked this around as quite a bit in a number of meetings.
Right. Yeah. So this was mentioned earlier that we went through this process. There was permits, or there was some applications that we moved forward with this. I think it was approximately 30, around that figure. And that's one of the reasons why we went ahead and moved forward with 50. So it gave us a little bit of leeway for growth. That doesn't mean that we cannot come back to the board at a later date and increase that number if we need to.
We talked about this when we were developing the parameters of the ordinance for HDL and our staff to work on. And, one of the things I kind of see is that this ordinance is probably, over a given time, change. There's to be successes, and there's to be some areas that we got to tighten up, and some areas that will open. So there'll be more opportunity for the public, for new supervisors, the cannabis industry to, change. But we have to take the first step at some point. And I don't disagree with Supervisor De La Cruz's concerns. We're going into this in the interest of the county. to make money. We're not trying to make money for the cannabis industry. This is something that we want to improve our staffing levels in public safety and general government. And this is the idea is this being a revenue source. It's not going to answer all our problems, but we have to kind of move forward with a very regulated first step, and I think this does a real good job. I want to thank Deuce and Sarah. I know you guys worked really hard to get it to this point, to get it to right now, and it was a goal of mine as chairman this year to get this ordinance through. And I hope that the support on this board is to continue to move it forward, and so we could, reap some of the benefits. That's where I'm at with it.
Mr. Chair, one small question. I apologize to the board. One question. Member of the public, Ms. Salinas, mentioned about why duplicate the permit process. It kind of makes sense. I mean, if somebody has a permit, a house permit, why not use that at the county level? Unless there's a justification or reason why.
Mr. Cromartie?
Yeah, I can answer that. The state law requires a background check for the owners and operators only. It does not require a background check for the employees of each individual business. So that leaves the individual businesses to decide for themselves, are we or are we not going to do a background check on our employees? Some of them don't bother. There's no state law requirement for it. It costs them, it adds to their operating costs to do background checks on everybody and to have them renewed on an annual basis. So many of them may opt not to do it. Now, if the city of Hollister opposes it, that's fine. But you're the county, you're a different governmental entity, and you cannot assume that unless you require it, that the businesses are going to do criminal background checks. The other issue is that LiveScan generally means that it's the FBI or the Department of Justice doing a criminal background check, and generally they can only share that information with governmental entities. They can do it with employers too, but it's better to have it done, frankly, in-house as opposed to imposing that requirement on the cannabis businesses. Yes, it adds additional cost to them, but again, it protects you. It's a known universe of employees, and it's something to be factored in. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does.
There's one other point I wanted to just share with you on cultivation. I have no reason to disagree with anything that Mr. Brazil said, but there's something for the county, for the board to be aware of, and that is that we expect there's going to be potentially a glut on the market in terms of cultivation capacity, because as of April 1st of this year, as you may know, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, which is responsible for issuing the cultivation licenses, had already issued enough licenses to account for 200% of the demand in California. And they've issued licenses in the 6 months since. So just food for thought. Certainly it's not my role to tell you what to do, but to lay out the facts.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the Board of Supervisors? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we consider adoption ordinance. Make a motion to accept the introduction, waive the readings of the ordinance, and continue to December 11th for adoption.
I have a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
One no. 4-1 vote. Supervisor Munzer, no. Okay, with that, I'm going to take a short 10-minute break before we hear the next item. Thank you.
playing.
All right. We'll move on to item 20. CEO Espinosa, you want to introduce that one?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are here today. I have Kevin O'Neill, our OES EMS director, here to present this particular item. I've asked him to actually work with the city on the contract at the tail end of negotiations. And we have before you a contract that the city has already approved, and we would be requesting your board to move forward with this particular item. So Kevin will go ahead and discuss some of the highlights. Kevin?
Hi, good morning again. So I have a very brief, high-level overview of the contract. I apologize, my PowerPoint's not as pretty as Dulce's was earlier, but it does have all the pertinent information. And also I want to say that Chief Bob Martin Del Campo is also here to answer any questions, should you have any, as well as City Manager Billy Avera from the city. So first is a brief history. I'm sure you're all very well aware, but originally, for many years, the county contracted with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. That contract ended in June of 2013 when this board decided to contract with the City of Hollister for fire protection services. That contract was then again, or a new contract was then agreed to between the city and the county in 2015. And this contract before you today is the third iteration of that partnership. It will take effect January 1, 2019. And there is a cost increase of about $600,000 initially. But there's also an increase in services and some differences to this contract that we haven't seen in previous contracts. And I'll highlight those now. So just a general overview. This is a joint effort between the County of San Benito, the City of San Juan Bautista, and the City of Hollister. Same as that has been going on since 2013. The city has already approved the contract on their end for both the county and San Juan Bautista. So at this point, just waiting for approval from this board and the City Council of San Juan Bautista. This contract includes service out of 4 fire stations, currently a station in San Juan Bautista, the 2 stations in Hollister, or the 2, I guess, stations we're used to, the one down here on 5th, the station off of Union Road and Highway 25, and then now a new station, a temporary station at least, is located at the airport. So all 4 of those stations are being used to service both the cities and the county. This contract includes fire inspections and pre-planning, so they'll continue to work with our RMA department doing inspections and those types of items. This is a 7-year contract as opposed to the 2- and 3-year contracts we had previously. This contract also has built into it 3 annual extensions should either party decide to continue, so for a total of 10 years. There is a termination clause, which requires 270 days notice, which is similar to the previous contracts as well. So some of the new items to this contract, the fire chief is obligated to give a biannual report to the Board of Supervisors to give updates and request direction on policy matters and the performance of the fire department. The City of Hollister will be procuring 3 new pieces of equipment: a Type 1 fire engine, which is the standard fire engine you tend to see rolling down the street, a Type 3 brush engine, which is the beefier off-road 4-wheel drive engine, and a off-road capable water tender, which is essentially a piece of equipment that's mostly just used for hauling water to areas where there may not be hydrants. So the City of Hollister will be going through the entire procurement process. The county, should the county wish to terminate the contract, will have the opportunity to purchase those pieces of equipment back at a prorated amount. The City of Hollister also assumes all maintenance of the equipment, of the apparatus, which is a new clause, so they'll be taking on that additional cost for preventative maintenance. Another clause in this contract, or in the scope that is of note, is that there is now a response criteria goal. So now that we as the county and the city of Hollister can track the how effective response is happening in the city and in the county. And that is based off of predetermined times, expectations of how long it should take a fire station from a given fire station to get to various parts of the city and the county. And you'll see in the scope there are 2 maps that show those areas. And there's also an additional criteria to account for some of the more rural and far out of the way parts of the county, which is based on an industry standard of 35 miles an hour and the distance from the closest fire station. So that way we can calculate on a case-by-case basis what the ideal response would be. And that's kind of a variation of standards because most standards we follow what's called the NFPA are really based on more urban areas. So it's pretty tricky to find how we track responses to some of these extremely remote areas of the county, New Idria, Bitterwater, et cetera, that are pretty far away from the more urban areas. Another item in this contract is it does identify that there will be a North County station, which will be designated as Station 3. It'll be, the plan currently is for the Rosamorado location, but it does leave the door open in case a new, better location is determined, whatever the board's direction is on that. But there will be a station, and that airport station will be moved to that station, that area, once the construction is complete. Lastly, the city really wanted a clause that addressed growth in the county and made it so that the contract could be reopened should growth in the county reach 12.5%. It does not bind us to anything. It does not say there will be an increase. It just simply allows us to sit down and have a discussion and say, growth has reached this amount. We would like to discuss whether the cost associated in this contract is still a fair cost or if something else should be added, an additional station, additional staffing, and what the county's share of the cost would be for that to account for that growth in that county and that increase in demand for the fire service. And lastly, staff recommends approval of this contract and to authorize the chair of the board to sign it.
Okay.
Like I said, Fire Chief is here. Should you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions. But we're very excited to put this contract behind us. It's been a good collaborative effort between the county and the city, and I think we all agree that this is a step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Supervisor Munzer and I share the committee for the fire on the fire committee. Supervisor Munzer, you have any comments? Or?
I just want to thank Kevin for all your hard work on getting us to this point, and thank you for this presentation.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that as well. You did, Kevin. You've done a real good job conveying our positions from the committee and negotiating that out and favorably with the city of Hollister, and hopefully this is be a good relationship going forward and solid fire protection for our community overall, both for the city and the county. And I certainly, any other questions? Supervisor Vela Cruz?
Yes, thank you. Kevin, in reference to the opener, 12.5%. In reference to the opener, 12.5%, is that countywide or in the unincorporated area?
Just in the unincorporated areas.
Unincorporated. And then, so let's assume moving forward in year 4, and we hit the 12.5. And in between from today to that time we hit the 12.5, the city does other programs that has nothing to do with providing services to the unincorporated area. And it's an added expense to them. would that added expense be a consideration in the opener discussion, or is just the relationship to the 12.5, which I assume is mostly response time?
I think when the contracts should this clause take effect and it is open, anything's on the table for renegotiation. But it is a negotiation, and I don't believe perhaps city manager or chief can come up and provide more clarification, but it is my understanding that we're not going to be paying for any additional services that are in the county that are not, or in the city that are not then offered to the county as well.
Well, I mean, here's a perfect example.
Okay.
I got a perfect example. The SAFER grant. Billy, did you guys get the SAFER grant?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. 2 years, 3 years down the road, that SAFER grant goes away. The city has to pay that now, because you're going to face a question of, do you lay off the SAFER grant employees, or you continue to provide the services?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to the chief here to answer that question.
And then, Chief, when we hit the 12.5 and it opens up, is that something that you're going to ask the board? Hey, we have these SAFER grant employees that we're paying. We want you to pay a higher percentage.
Okay, to answer the question, how the SAFER grant is constructed now, after seeing the success or failure of it from previous years, is that Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, is providing 80% for the first 2 years, and at the final year, it's going to be only 20%. So we're actually burdening almost the entire cost on that third year. I perceive, and hopefully we can absorb the remainder of those personnel. We're looking at retirement at the end, but what we'll do during the opener, if there's any way that I can reposition our engine companies to address where the growth is, we'll go ahead and do that first before we start hiring on.
Okay. And then my next question, you're up there, Chief. I think I read it wrong, so help me out here. If we were to build the fourth station out there on Rosa Barra,
correct,
the staffing level, would that be paid by us on top of what we're paying out, or that's all inclusive?
That would be the repositioning that I'm talking about. One of the repositionings that I'm talking about.
So it would be inclusive then?
Yeah, it would be inclusive.
Okay. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Chief. Okay. Those are the only two questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. That was a big, important item for the Fire Committee. I had a number of conversations with Supervisor Medina as far as the importance of having a station out there on Fairview, Rosa Murata, North County area to provide, benefit for a number of reasons. That was a big issue. Supervisor, can I go Supervisor Rivas first and then to Supervisor Medina?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank staff. I know that this contract's been a long time coming, and so I want to thank staff, thank the City of Hollister, Chief. I'm really looking forward to an efficient fire service, and hopefully we can start talking about a third fire station, and moving forward, so we could have the protection we need in all the rural parts of this county as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Medina.
Mr. City Manager, the 12.5%. What is the base on the 12.5%?
Yeah, I was hoping that I would clarify Supervisor De La Cruz's question as well. So the 12.5%, we kind of went through a few iterations of it, and we just decided that it'd be a lot easier if just at the end of the fourth year, we just said if the county and the unincorporated grew by more than 12.5% of the number that we will establish on January 1, which is usually done by the Department of Finance. For you guys, it's about 900 units or 950, I think is probably what it'll ultimately be. And again, the only reason why that was important for a couple of our council members was that if in fact that some of the larger projects that is sort of being proposed in the county, if those start to take off and we do end up building some, we just wanted to have the opportunity to come back to the Board of Supervisors and we look at that. Sustaining a 3% growth between now and 48 months seems, I don't really necessarily expect it, and we'll be able to absorb the normal development that you guys are seeing on a regular basis. So, I mean, that's really the reason for the reopener.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? I know. I just, for the life of me, could not understand the position of the mayor on this contract. It's beneficial to the city of Hollister. It's beneficial to the county, and there's protections built in that we maintain a level of fire protection that our citizens expect. And I think the city of Hollister, Mr. Rivera, the fire chief, did an outstanding job putting this thing together with those protections. And I'm looking forward to, putting this to rest as well. Any comments from the public? Seeing no comments from the public, I'll bring it back to the board for direction.
Mr. Chair, I got one more question before Mark asks for call for the question. Ray, knowing that we have that opener down the road, doesn't it behoove us to maybe increase development fees to accommodate that there is going to be an additional cost down the road?
Can you repeat that again?
Sure. Knowing that there's going to be an opener on the contract once we reach a 12.5%.
Potentially.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
All right.
Shouldn't we, say, you know what, maybe we should increase the impact fees on development for the fire protection?
I don't know, Billy. I can.
Yeah. So again, let me sort of explain just the reopener. The 12.5% is really only in the first 4 years of the contract. So if you don't exceed that in the first 4 years, we'll finish off the last 3 years and go through the process. Because again, the inflators are built into the program, right? And we've had this argument several times on various different levels. But we felt that it was important that we had at least one opportunity somewhere in there in case that there was excessive growth. If there isn't within that first 4 years, Supervisor De La Cruz, there really isn't necessarily a reopener expected until you're at the end of the 7th year. Again.
Thank you, Billy.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, and maybe just lighten a little bit further. So, regarding where we stand today, through AB8 and some of the funding sources we have for fire, we actually do not have enough to cover the entire contract. So we're going to have to subsidize it, which we already did through the general fund for this year, which we budgeted for. However, as the growth occurs through either through the CFD that we created and these other avenues, we are receiving some funding. So as the housing increases, that's when we start receiving the funds to be able to kind of subsidize the upfront money, so to speak, that we're covering for this. And again, we did outline some safety funding, as you probably aware and probably saw through the consent agenda through San Juan Oaks in regards to that development. We actually increased that. We had a normal fiscal neutral plan already, but we added a little bit more to the safety element for that environment just because of the senior housing element of that. So we're looking at trying to cover those costs for fire and for safety, additional costs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Approve contract with the City of Hollister for countywide fire protection services for the period of January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2025 in the amount of $1,845,000 for 2019.
That was a second. Second by Supervisor Rivas. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? 5-0. We'll move on to item 21. CEO Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this item's coming out of our Health and Human Services Department. I'd like to invite Jim Riding Sword up to open this particular item. This is regarding an update or receiving the Community Homeless Planning Committee report from Health and Human Services, and this is from Jim Riding Sword, our director.
Good morning. I know you've been looking at a lot of slides today. I hope you will indulge me for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Can we take our conversations outside, please?
Notre Dame fans out there.
My sister's a disappointed Trojan fan today. So as we do, we come to the board on occasion and give you an update on homeless services, and that's what we're planning to do today. There's a lot going on. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm going to try today. Supervisor Botello has been sitting with us faithfully for the last year and a half, and I think he gets a sense of, there's just lots of stuff happening. And so that's what we want to try to convey to you today in this process. Let's see. Enter or there we go. So here's the what we call the model that we share with people when we're talking with them. And I have to say to you, 5 years ago, this was not where we were. We didn't know where we were going 5 years ago, and the board and the city, just helped us kind of move in that direction, and we've been learning as we go along. So we have the shelter built, and it opened last December. So this is what, November 20th, right? So through the month of October, here's the first thing I want to report to you. Studies show that having homeless people on the streets of a community can cost up to $70,000 a year, because it takes a lot of involvement with a lot of people, law enforcement, health, just lots of people to kind of deal with that as an issue. Studies also show that if you can help those people move from the streets into homes and work, that cost will drop to $20,000 to $30,000 a year. I'm happy to report to you that since last December, we have placed 32 people in homes that were homeless. We have helped 26 people get work. These are all good things, I think, from the point of view of not only the individual, but from the community, because everybody who's working is contributing more to the community than when they're not working. So that's where I would like to start. Phase 2 is the support services. This is being worked on right now in cooperation with RMA, and we expect to be open April. Okay? And so what will happen is people can come into the shelter, and then in the morning they can get up and go back and work with staff, in a very focused way to try to do things like housing and work. Okay? And then phase 3 is transitional housing. We got a grant, which you'll see a little bit later, from the state to do 8 to 10 units of transitional housing in that facility. And so that will come once we get done with phase 2, then we'll start working on phase 3. I also have to say this model has been requested by at least a half a dozen counties. They want to see what San Benito County is doing. And they have asked us to come and meet with them and talk about what we're doing and how they can begin to move their communities to go forward. So I really commend the board and the city council, for providing the political leadership that allows us, to go down this pathway. So since February 2014, when I was called into a room and Supervisor De La Cruz said, "Please solve the homeless problem," here's what we have done, and just briefly. In phase 1, we went out and got $1.5 million in community development block grant funds in order to purchase and begin to work on the building 1161 San Felipe. In phase 2, we went out and got $2 million in community block development grants in order to put together that support services part. We also went and got $4 million in whole person care funds that gives us an opportunity to work with people in a different way to kind of see that they get to the hospital, they get to the doctor, they get to their appointments with behavioral health, those kinds of things that are important to help people become successful. Again, that's opening in March. And then we went out and we got $1.465 million in California transitional housing funds. And that's what we will use for those 8 transitional housing units when we get there. So here's some things that are coming up. The first thing and what we're working on right now is what's called Homeless Emergency Aid Program funds. These are funds that were $500 million that were put out by the state last year to assist counties to transition to Proposition 1, should Proposition 1 pass, which it now has. And so we have identified out of that San Benito County, and we've been working with the Continuum of Care in Monterey County on this, will receive approximately $1.86 million to do some activities as we are moving forward. We met with the county homeless planning group, to talk with them about that and to gain consensus on how we might move forward. And we're continuing to meet with the Continuum of Care to secure this allocation by January 2019. Potential uses of the funds are outreach services, including community policing, a street outreach nurse, a social worker, and a housing navigator, and related uses. We work closely with the Sheriff's Department in talking about this, and the idea is if we don't have people that are coming to the shelter, we're going to go out to the street and we're going to start working with them. We've discussed this in the planning group a lot, that it doesn't do us any good if we ignore people. We have to engage them. We have to tell them that if you are in San Benito County, we expect you to be engaged. So we can use some of that money for capital improvements, for expanded use of the emergency shelter, or day or drop-in center services, which is something that probably is something that we want to consider. Permitted supportive housing is also an allowable use. Supportive housing means that if you take somebody off the streets and you put them in a house and you say you're on your own, the chances are they're probably going to fail. But if you say to them, look, here we are, we're going to help you get to the doctor, we're going to help you get to Social Security, we're going to help you make your appointments, we're going to help you figure out how to go to work, we're going to help you do those kinds of things, there's a greater chance of success. And also rental assistance. Now, Proposition 1 passed on November the 6th, I think it was, Election Day. That provides $4 billion in general obligation bonds from the state. $1 billion of that is going to the Veterans Home Loan Program. The other $3 billion are intended to come to local jurisdictions. Just on a geographic basis, we would estimate that San Benito County should be able to think about $2.75 million in multifamily housing programs. I think that we could probably do better than that because we have a strong track record. We could be thinking about $450 million in farm worker housing, $450,000 in farm worker housing. Sorry. And we could also be looking at another $400,000 in a local housing trust match grant program. So part of the provision in Proposition 1 says if you take money that you are now dedicating to moderate and low-income housing and you put it into a trust fund, the state will match that money. So if you put $1,000 in there, the state will give you $1,000. If you put $1 million in there, the state will give $1 million. I'm sure there's a cap on how much the state will give, but it is an opportunity for local jurisdictions to look at how they can leverage some of those things. There's also $300 million for self-help housing, $150 to low and moderate income buyers, and there's other funding for transit housing projects, which we talked about in our last meeting, and Mary Gilbert is going to take a look at that to see if there's just any kind of opportunity there for San Benito County. Then there's the next Community Block Development Grant. That was announced on the 1st of November. We can apply for up to $3 million to expand and add year-round housing for migrant families. And that is the recommendation that we would like to kind of go forward with. We have some land that we have identified near the current migrant camp, the family camp right behind it, between that and the mobile homes that are out there, that belongs to the county. And I've talked with RMA about the possible use of that land, and we think at this point in time that we could probably put 25 to 30 two-bedroom units out there. Now, what's the need for it? Enrique tells me that every year at the family migrant camp, we're turning away about 30 families. There's a real possibility that those families can become homeless or live in housing that's, isn't very conducive for them to be working. So in this next round, for the purpose of acquiring and building some additional units, what the group said to us and what we've agreed to and we've talked with the Community Action Board about is that we'd like to move forward with a proposal for up to $3 million for some new migrant housing out on the south side. We'd also like to include two public services requesting $500,000, and those public services have been vetted and reviewed by the Community Action Board, and they have sent us their recommendations. Enrique will be working on completing that for us. There's also an opportunity in CDBG for us to go in for a $100,000 planning grant, and we are recommending that this year. The $100,000 planning grant is just what it sounds like. It allows us to set aside some funding in order to study some issues that might be important in San Benito County. One of the issues, for example, that the Community Action Board feels is important is a youth center. So it allows us to study that issue and try to figure out how can we do that? How could we get there? Where would we get the funding from to do something like that? How would we sustain it? And so we are planning then to now also apply for a planning grant in this round. So here we are, almost 5 years later. It'll be 5 years in February, right, Supervisor De La Cruz? So here's the lessons that we learned, the things we did right. From the very beginning, we established a strong, collaborative community conversation. That's what the Homeless Services Planning Group is all about, is to allow people from agencies, both public and community, to come in and talk with us and help us figure out where we're going. We contracted with a seasoned grant writer. And because of that contract, that money that we brought in, that almost $9 million, is a result of the work that he has done for us. We worked with the state legislature, and we plan to continue to do that. We think that with the recent election, we have two representatives that we can work closely with who care about these issues. We need to figure out how better to hire people into these positions that are created by these grants and pilot programs. And we're having conversations with Mark Gregerson, who's the consultant on HR, to kind of try to figure that out better. It's just been kind of a stumbling block having to try to use temporary workers who could only come to work on certain times and only work so long and don't have benefits and all that kind of stuff. We need to kind of try to figure out how to do better there. And then moving forward, well, again, we need to continue with the strong collaborative. When I talk to other communities, I tell them, start with your community. Start with what we have called here a community-based high-performance process, one that says to the community, we need solutions. We need to help you with those solutions. Supervisor Botello has sat through those meetings. I mean, they are pretty straightforward in talking with us. And I think, especially with the new governor and a new legislature, it's time for San Benito County to really think about establishing an annual plan to work closely with the state legislature. And I'm going to run through a few things here that have been happening, because things happen like every day. So here's my list, okay? Well, I already talked to you about HEAP funds, and I already talked to you about Prop 1 funds. And then over at Behavioral Health, there's the behavioral health funds that came under Proposition 2, and I know Alan is working on that. There are grants that we could go after. There are mechanisms called new market tax credits that are going to be reauthorized by Congress that are going to go forward with those kinds of vehicles that allow local jurisdictions to work with their local developers on actually moving projects forward and getting investment for those projects, which is called social investment, because where they make their money is off the tax credits. And so it's really an investment in a community to get something done. There are new opportunity zones that passed as part of the 2017 tax cut. They're similar to new market tax credits. They just work a little bit differently. And what I read recently is on a national level in opportunity zone funding, there's about $2 trillion available today. Let's see. Oh, Medicaid. That was the most interesting thing. I've been arguing for a couple of years that support housing for people that need that should be part of a health package. It should be something that we do in our health programs, just to keep people out of the hospital, to keep people connected with their primary physician. Well, the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services announced yesterday, I think it was, that he's going to encourage states to use Medicaid, or in our case, Medi-Cal, to provide those kinds of services as a health benefit. Now, I don't know what all that means, but I do know it's now out there on the table as another way for us to take a look at things. Again, we have a new governor and a new legislature. This governor has said, as I understand it, that affordable housing and solving the homeless problem is important to him. So we'll see how that goes. And so those are things that we think, and those are things that we think that we can move forward with. And the bottom line here is, I said to you almost 5 years ago that political leadership will help us get there. Well, consistent leadership helps us organize the parade for you. Great. And I just wanted to close with this. This was you when you were opening the center, the shelter at 1161. And I want to thank you for your political leadership, for your insight. And that's our update for today. And we certainly are here for questions and answers.
I really appreciate you taking the time to put together this presentation. We've taken full advantage of the opportunities that we had at the time that we worked on the home ribbon cutting, and apparently there's more opportunities going forward into the future where we could help people get off the street. And I felt, Director Riding Sword, you needed to present the kind of an update where we were. As you noted, I've been to a number of meetings, as well as Supervisor Munzer, on the homeless issue and trying to figure out a strategy going forward. And it was time to bring that to the full board in this presentation. And thank you very much. Is there any questions for the director from the board? If not, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone from the public? Please come up to the podium.
Hello, my name is Tony Zuniga. I benefited from one of your programs as of recent, the beautification program. I'm the crew lead in that program, and me and my 4 other constituents have greatly benefited from it. Also, my stay at the shelter, I've been there for 8 months, and within that 8 months, I've gotten employment. I've also had the opportunity for housing. And so far, everything's been really positive. You guys funding this program, I appreciate it, and so do my other 4 constituents. For about almost a year and a half, I've been unemployed, and now I have employment. So this is really, really beneficial, and I'm glad you guys reinstated it. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, it really means a lot to the board for you to take the time from your day to come and give us your story, and
not a problem.
It's absolutely worthwhile to us that you're doing well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a good day.
Anyone else?
My voice is a little hoarse, but I'm on a leave right now for some medical issues, but I just want to let you know that I remember that day with the ribbon cutting, and I remember when I interviewed for a position with Enrique and Jim, and them saying how this was what they saw as a reality, and seeing it, working for Community Homeless Solutions, and seeing the guests come in every single day. When they come in and they tell myself or the rest of the team, hey, I found a job today. Or, hey, you know what? I think I found a place to live. We got one of those yesterday that we're going to be referring over to you for ESG. We work as a team, the county, whole person care, behavioral health, everybody. It takes all of us to be able to move forward. The Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, Hazel Hawkins Hospital. We all work together for the same reason. We go out and we do cleanups. You know, code enforcement is taking the flyers out there. In a way, this is a blessing, and in a way it's not. Our men's dorm is completely full again. Our women's dorm is almost getting there, right? We were only averaging 7 women a night. Now we average about 17, 18 a night, which means our beds are getting less and less because the need is getting out there. I wanted to thank all of you, the Board of Supervisors. I just love working with you, Anthony, when we talk about things, to be able to do things. And Enrique, I don't work with him anymore, but we have a better relationship now. He always has my back whenever we have concerns or things that are going on. and Jim also. Lastly, I hope I'm going to be bringing you guys some flyers, but on December 5th, we're going to be celebrating our 1-year anniversary. We're going to be having a little tiny open house from 11 to about 2 o'clock. So I hope you guys can come by and just take a look at the center. We are actually going to be having some of our guests do the tours this time instead of the staff. And then the beautification project, if you guys want to go out to the Migrant Center and see our hardworking guests out there working hard. And I'm happy to say they're getting their first paycheck tomorrow. So we're really, really excited about that. So thank you guys for this opportunity to help the population that not many people want to help. And hopefully you guys can meet my team, because they don't do it, believe me, for the money. They do it because they really, really want to help. So thank you.
Thank you for everything you're doing. Okay, Say Espinosa.
Hey, I just wanted to say thank you, Jim. I know there was a lot of hard work, and you've been diligent and moving forward. So it's definitely well known that the county is doing something. San Benito County, not San Bernardino County, is moving forward with progress in homelessness. And to be quite honest with you, my peers, the CAOs, have discussed this. They've come to me, asked how we've done it. The board members from the respective counties have come to me and have asked to schedule time with Jim to meet him and his staff and the facility to see how it is and how it's operated. So we are becoming a true model at the state level, definitely within the counties of the state of California. And I want to tell you thank you, Jim, for all the hard work.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And if there's no other, Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I as well want to thank Jim, and all the people that have been involved. I mean, this really, and CEO said it best, this is really a model, not only for this region, but for the state. And so, and obviously the comments you made, Jim, very well taken. I think this is a priority for the Governor-elect Newsom,
Yes.
as far as, and so that's why I think that we have the right people in place to be watching what the state does, with a record amount of money. Moving forward into the budget, I think it's a little over $30 billion in surplus, half of that into reserves. And so certainly this is a time to watch what Sacramento is going to do to release some of those fundings that could be available for expansion and to help support, the programs that are in place now. But thank you so much, Jim.
You're welcome.
I mean, it's been a pleasure working with you, and and everything between you and Enrique, and what the staff has done is really incredible. And just know the work that you've done is been noticed. So
Thank you. And when we come and talk to you, we'll only be asking for San Benito County's share.
Okay, we'll continue on working. That was a report, and thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item. Receive an update regarding, the intersection of Fairview and Fallon Road.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, your board did request RMA, and in particular John Girton, our director from RMA, to come back to your board after the elections to discuss Fallon Road and Fairview. So John Girton is here to update your board. John.
All right. So since the last meeting, I don't have a whole lot new to update you on, but I did want to bring it back knowing that this was Supervisor Rivas's last meeting with us. And I know that Supervisor De La Cruz told you he expects a San Benito sofa in your office. I'll be happy with an RMA chair or maybe even a footstool. But I'll be there talking to you about road issues and other stuff. Somebody took my... But anyway, so the really the only thing that I have to report on at this point is that the with Measure G passing, this is a project that's on the list for Measure G. It is a priority for Measure G funding, and that we'll be putting together over the next couple of months. We'll be putting together a 5 and 10 year strategy plan for how we're going to use Measure G. And what projects need to get done over that period, and then a funding strategy and all of that. So there's a lot to think about and come back and talk with your board about.
and get your direction. But this is obviously one of the highest priorities for that funding. In the interim, we're looking at some safety improvement measures, flashing signs to warn people about the intersection coming up, all kinds of things to try to get people to slow down as they go through that intersection. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Supervisor Medina?
Yeah, you mentioned the safety measures, flashing signs, and things of that nature. When would that be completed?
Well, with the I was hoping to have it done before Thanksgiving, but with the holidays and other priorities, we didn't get to it quickly. But I'm expecting sometime in. It depends on how long it takes to get the signs. So I'm hoping before Christmas, but it may be first of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? I guess we'll just continue to monitor this along with other projects. I know we're probably have to slow down that whole stretch of road somehow, and probably be a number of signs and maybe even other stretches of road. But it's a challenge. And the other thing that we got to kind of keep in mind, from the past, we probably should have been asking for more of a mitigation on Fairview Road with development, and there's probably be more development going to the, what would it be, south, down Fairview from Sunny Slope to Airline Highway, that maybe these new projects should be taking into account that they got to kick in more money until they squeal. But Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah. So just for clarification, John, at a later time, this board will assess the funding priorities when it comes to transportation projects for this county. And so at that time, would it be appropriate to talk about, say, for instance, this particular intersection, Fairview and Fallon Road, whether it's a realignment and all that stuff?
Yes, definitely.
So that would be the time?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll go back to the board. This kind of information right now. We'll move on to 23.
Okay. This is John's item. John?
Yeah. So I just wanted to give you all a little update on where we are on the bridge program and the bridge projects. I'm not really, well, I think you got a report from RMA maybe about a year and a half ago about the bridge projects and the status of where they all were, and that most of them had been sitting for a long time. So I want to give you an update on since January, when I became aware of the issues with the bridge project and what's been going on now, and some of the hurdles that we're facing getting these projects going again and getting these much-needed bridge improvements done for the community, and some of the work that we've been doing with Caltrans. So I have a lot of information here. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly because I know we're getting close to lunchtime here. So we have basically 11 bridges. It's 10 projects. One of the projects, the Y Road Bridge project, was actually deemed not financially feasible or necessary, so we took that back to Caltrans and took the no bid or the no build option to them, and they approved that. It's still on our list of projects, and I didn't want to take it out just so you all know where we are with that. But for the entire county, you can see where the 11 bridges are that we're talking about. They're spread out all throughout the county. I know it's a small map, so it's not easy to see, but you can see that they're all scattered around the entire county. The first one is actually two bridges. It's Shore Road Bridge and San Felipe Bridge. This is Shore Road over, I'm going to say this wrong, Tequisquita Slough. And the other one is on San Felipe over the branch of the Santa Ana Creek. And on the map, you can see the San Felipe Road Bridge is right there, give or take a mile north of the 156 intersection. And the Shore Road Bridge is right there at Lake Road, just so everybody has an idea of where those are. So this one's actually relatively easy from a standpoint of the work that's getting done. This is really just improvements to the safety improvements and better design of the railing on the side to make the approach onto the bridge safer as cars are passing over the bridge, and to prevent people from driving off of the bridge. This one was relatively easy to get moving again and get it out. So right now it's been to Caltrans. We're waiting for final approval of the PS&E, which is plan specifications and engineer's estimate. And once we receive that and the final additional funding that we need for the preliminary engineering, then we can get that one to your board for approval of the plans, and we can get that one out to bid and get it constructed. Right now we're looking at having that one constructed by, if everything goes according to plan at this point, we can get that one constructed by mid next year, by summer of next year. So I have several of these timelines to show you. You can see for whatever reason, I don't know the reasons, but for various reasons, all of these bridge projects seem to have stalled out. Well, the contracts all expired in 2015, 2016, so that's what we've put down as the date when the project stalled. In reality, the work that was being done or should have been done on these projects, all of them stalled out several years prior to that. So really, for anywhere from 3 to 5 years, these projects have been sitting on a shelf with very little work being done, unless there was consultant work that was already being directed and the consultants continued with their work, which I'll talk a little bit more later, gave us some problems and some cleanup issues. So this one, so this is where we kind of get ourselves and shoot ourselves in the foot. This is 100% funded with federal funding, but because of some of the delays and some of the poor contract management in the past, the consultant was asked to do work outside of a contract, which we can go back and we can retroactively approve a contract so that we can pay the contractor for work that we asked them to do. Unfortunately, under the federal regulations and the federal reimbursement program, they don't recognize that as valid work because it was done outside of their approved contract, what they approved in the contract. So that's why you see about 1.5% of now the total cost to construct this bridge actually had to be paid out of the road fund and out of county coffers. Everybody's favorite, Hospital Road Bridge. So Hospital Road Bridge had been hung up for a long time. The engineering kind of got pushed to the side for a while. The right-of-way continued, fortunately, even though it took a long time, and we had a number of different owners of the parcel we were trying to acquire. That actually finally got finalized a few months ago, and we're just waiting for Caltrans' final approval of that right-of-way acquisition. I think everybody knows where that bridge. Well, it was a low water crossing. It's going to be replaced with a full bridge when this project gets constructed. It's right there between Southside Road and Cienega. Again, this was a low water crossing that washed out in the heavy rainfalls and storms back in, Supervisor Munzer can correct me, I think it was in 98, 97, 98 time period.
Either 96 or 98.
Right. So it's been at least 20 years that we've been trying to get this bridge constructed. So now we've got this one going. We still have some potential hurdles with this one. Right now I don't foresee any obstruction that's going to prevent us from getting this going. It's really more just kind of technical issues with FHWA. This is on the record, this is still a low water crossing, and in the federal aid bridge program, They don't have a mechanism for numbering low water crossings. They only number bridges, and you need to have a bridge number to go through their process.
You know, and if I could interject, and this goes before Supervisor Munzer's time. This goes before Supervisor De La Cruz's and my time. But when we came in, for the life of me, I just could not understand why we couldn't put back the low water crossing at around a tune of about $3 million. The bridges would be closer to $20 million, I assume, and the low water crossing works just fine upstream at Tres Pinos. And here's another example of the frustration I think the public has with politicians. They kind of blame us, but there's other blame to go around. You know, it's still not possible to, you know, it's all designed now, and we're so far down the road with land acquisition and everything. But this is a lot more money than the low water crossing is all we would probably need. But we could never get that through. It should have been done by now, and I can't even describe the frustration.
Yeah. So I'm not aware of the thought process that went into this in the past when they decided to design a full bridge. What I can tell you is that now low water crossings are no longer eligible for federal funding. So it's good that we got these even though obviously our, Public Works and RMA were overwhelmed by the number of bridge projects that were submitted and obviously had some difficulty getting them moving and keeping them moving. In the long run, I think we're going to be better off now that we've got them moving again, because like I said, we would never qualify for any funding to fix those in the future. We would be funding those out of local funds. Mm-hmm. So like this one, I believe, is...
before you move on, Supervisor...
Well, I'm not going to move on, but this is 100%, or, well, give or take, it's 100% funded. So we are getting a full bridge that's 100% funded with federal funds. You know, like we're seeing with the South Side Slide and the South Side Low Water Crossing, even in the good times and in the current state we're in now, we don't necessarily see the necessity of having a full bridge. I think it's still better for the community in the long run because it does provide another access route if there is an emergency and the road washes out somewhere else on Cienega and people need to take that route. So there are contingencies that, you know, you can't really think of when things are good.
Supervisor Munzer.
So, John, what is it? This is the first thing I've heard about this number. So this is not a designated bridge crossing now? It's still a low water crossing?
So it's designated by us and by Caltrans and CTC, but it's not. It doesn't have a bridge number with the federal with FHWA, Federal Highway.
Is that just something else that we overlooked? We should have been working towards getting that?
No, they don't. They don't number low water crossings.
No, that's what I'm saying. But this is a bridge crossing, isn't it?
No, right now it's until we actually build the bridge, it's still considered a low water crossing.
Okay, so not having this number is not going to hold up the process.
No, well, it is holding us up a little bit, but it's not holding us up in any way that's going to impact the project right now. We have verbal approval of our preliminary engineering funding. We just don't have the final written approval from FHWA simply because they can't get it into their system, their automated system, which allows them to do that.
Well,
so it's just a technical issue.
New bridges are built where there were no bridges. How does that... Oh, okay.
I can't speak for the federal government.
All right.
It's just something we're working through with them, and they said that they should have it resolved shortly.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, again, this is one, so you see right-of-way was authorized in 2010, so it took us 8 years to get through that process. Again, the contracts for the consultants all expired in 2016. And then you can see since January, we've picked it back up and got it moving again. We're getting contracts approved, and we've got Caltrans on board with us on this one and helping us move this one through the system and working with FHWA to get their technical glitch resolved. And again, another one where we had a little bit of an impact to us because we had work that was done outside of a contract. Y Road is the one that we chose the no-build option, and that was approved by Caltrans. The benefit of doing the no-build, originally staff had approached Caltrans and used incorrect terminology and said we wanted to cancel the project. The problem with canceling the project is then you're on the hook to reimburse Caltrans for all of the funds that you'd been reimbursed for up until that point. Really, it was just, when you're dealing with engineers, you got to be exact. And so it was a terminology issue. So when we came in, we sat down with Caltrans, got the understanding between us and them that this was the no-build option. No-build made more sense after we'd gone through the environmental review process. And so then they got on board with that. So we got fully reimbursed for all of the costs to date, and now the project is canceled.
Good, perfect. You guys did something right. We got something done.
That's right.
We're not 11, not bad.
We're not doing something, so we did something.
Not doing something is good sometimes.
Okay, so Rosa Morada Bridge is one of the three bridges that I want to talk a little bit more detail about because they're some of the things that we've had to deal with. So Rosa Morada is up towards the end of the road there, and it's a small crossing. I think only the people who live out there are probably even aware that it's there. But it does have some deficiencies. It has some safety issues. Let's see. Got to check my notes here real quick. Yeah, so this will be to replace the entire structure, mainly because it's an old structure and from a safety perspective, it's deficient. It'll also improve the approach and the exit from the bridge for safety issues so that people can pass each other safely and not have any issues as they cross that bridge. This is another one that was held up in preliminary engineering, so we've worked with Caltrans to get their approval. This one, again, it sat on the shelf for so long that the environmental work needs some rework, and there's some other components of the preliminary engineering that had been done years ago that are going to have to be revamped and renewed. Caltrans considers that rework that's not eligible under the project, so I've had to make several trips down to San Luis Obispo to sit with District 5 staff, Scott Lyons and myself, to go down and try to get some trust back with the District 5 staff that San Benito County Resource Management Agency is taking these projects seriously and that we really want to get these things done and earn back some trust from them, because up until about 6 months ago, we didn't have that trust with them. The direction that I was getting from the district director down there was no more extensions on projects. In fact, I was told specifically that even though they know me from my past positions, it's really not about me, that I'm the fifth guy who's come down telling them that he's going to fix it, and then none of us stay long enough to fix it. So I had to convince them that I'm not going anywhere, I hope, and that we're, even if I do, we're setting up the process and the procedures and the staff to keep these things going, and that we have the full support of the board to keep these projects going. So this is one of the projects that we really had to work with them on to get them to understand that we are going to get this thing done, that we're willing to, take responsibility for the problems that we caused, and not fight with them over the little bit that they don't recognize as reimbursable. So you'll see now it's 100%. It was 100% funded. Approximately 4% now we're going to have to take care of out of RSTP funds. That's a recommendation before you today. So it's $138,000. We were able to talk them down. Originally they were saying, no, that's it. All of the additional money. So I think it was, Scott, I think it was somewhere between $1 and $1.5 million for the three bridges. We got that down to shy of $700,000 that the county will pay for, and Caltrans is going to accept the other additional costs as reimbursable costs. So we were able basically to split the difference with them. But that took a lot of negotiating. Again, you see this one's stalled. This has been stalled for almost probably closer to 8 or 9 years. But the contracts expired in 2013. So this one has taken some time to get moving again, but we're still looking for 2021 as our end of construction date. So even with some of these that have significant hurdles to overcome, we're looking at pretty aggressive timelines to get all of these bridges done. They're all scheduled right now for construction in 19, 20, and 21. I think the last one being done in 2022. Lime Kiln Bridge. You see that one that's right down there on Lime Kiln, just south of Cienega Road. And so this one, again, all the bridge projects were stuck in preliminary engineering, and we were getting them all moving out of that. And a lot of that is getting the consultants who did most of the work back on board and getting them re-engaged under a new contract, and then getting Caltrans to approve those contracts. As some of these move forward, we may have some more issues where we have to go down and negotiate with Caltrans again on some of these. And if that happens, I'll come back and let you know. But you see, again, 2021, we're looking at the timeline for ending construction for this one. Right now, as far as we can tell, this one is still 100% federally funded. Same with Anzar. Anzar's a small bridge over in Supervisor Botello's district, right over there.
All the time.
Just east of 101, right? And you've taken me over it a few times.
Yeah.
So again, this one, same thing, is in preliminary engineering. We're working on the right-of-way authorization from Caltrans. We're looking to get that done fairly quickly. I don't anticipate to have the same problems with this one as we did with Hospital Road. And again, we picked this one up just a few months ago, and we're already looking to get this one moving again by 2021. This is one, again, where some work was done outside of the contract, so we had to pick up that cost. So Rocks Road Bridge, this is another one like Rosa Morada where we've spent considerable time and effort working with Caltrans on getting the public interest finding forms approved by them and working on what they'll accept as reimbursable and then what we'll need to pick up. You can see where this one is. This is a very small bridge. It just barely qualifies for the federal program. I actually drove across this thing probably 6 or 7 times before I knew there was a bridge there. So
I have a water district that doesn't want that bridge done at all.
Yeah, I know. I see out of the corner of my eye.
Yeah, there he is.
He'll get up next and tell you why. Same thing. Preliminary engineering, we're getting moving again on that. Got to get a new consultant under contract for that one, request right-of-way acquisition authorization, and then we'll get that one moving again unless Rob can convince you not to. And again, 2021, we're looking at construction of that one. So this is another one that's before you today for approval to request RSTP money from COG to cover the $127,000 in rework that needs to be done for this project.
Now, we've done some work already, and the costs are part of that federal reimbursement. So how much, if we don't do that project, how much is that?
I was going to save that for the end and scare you at the end. Okay. So if we don't move forward with these projects, at this point, we've already been reimbursed close to about $5.4 million. So we would have to pay back that $5.4 million for these 3 bridges.
For which, for the 3 bridges?
Yeah, it's for Rosa Morada, Rocks, and Union. So if we don't move forward with the RSTP or some other type of local funding, then we'll have to pay back that already reimbursed amount.
Okay. Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Sure, they can pay it.
Pinoch Road, I won't get into too much detail on this one because there are some potential environmental issues and issues with one of the neighbors down there. But this is one that we've picked back up, and we're getting it moving again. This is fairly far down on Pinoch Road, and this will fix some issues with the flow through there, prevent some backup that causes historically there. We're working with one of the property owners down there on some of the potential issues that the bridge design could cause in eroding private property down there. So we want to make sure that we have a design that won't do that. But there's environmental considerations that need to be done. So this bridge project still has hurdles that need to be overcome, and so we'll be coming back in the future to talk to you all about that as we get farther down the road on this one. But again, just conservatively, this is the one that's probably out the farthest, and we're looking at 2022 as a construction timeline. That may be a little aggressive, but we want to keep the fire lid under all of these projects now that we've got them going again. So I'm putting in aggressive timelines and holding staff and contractors to that. Again, this is another one that work was done outside of a contract. And then Union is the third that's before you today for RSDP funding. Union, everybody's, I think, familiar with it right there. It's just as you get to Cienega Road if you turn right off of San Benito and head north on Union. I think everybody remembers trying to get over that bridge a couple months ago when PG&E was out there painting their utilities on it, because I heard a lot about that. So this one, again, picked it up in preliminary engineering, same story as all of the rest. The original estimate for this one, it's gone up considerably, so we're working with Caltrans on, we're going to have to put this into the big bridge program where you get more funding. Anything over $20 million for construction has to go into a different program. We've already talked with the district office. They don't see a problem with that. Actually, they think that might actually help this one move faster by getting it into that program. But you can see the cost now, the estimate is, the total is over $40 million to get that bridge redone. And that one's going to include seismic improvements. And
so with this one in particular, with the local fund, are we going to use any sort of impact fees as far as help offset some of that?
I don't know. Have we already paid this $5 million? Do you know? I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, and then the other question I have, kind of a concern of that area. I don't know if the environmental work looked into it, but one of the problems we have with the existing bridge is it being undermined from just the flow of the water and the movement of the riverbed itself. I guess the new bridges would be like the 156 bridge where the pylons are be drilled down 90 feet or something ridiculous, and so we won't have that problem. Are we have 4 lanes going across then, or is it just to be the 2 lanes still? Because in our long-term plan for Union, it's supposed to be 4 lanes.
I don't know. Do you?
No, I don't remember either. It was before my time, so
Yeah. Well, that's something I want to bring to your attention.
We'll look at it.
Yeah.
And something that we probably should have on our radar screen as growth and development occurs down on the south side we probably should be working with the city as well with the impacts on that road, because it's, you know, it's slated to be 4 lanes, and then I think we're building a 2-lane bridge. I've always had a problem with the project, you know, right from the start. So
right, I'll have to look at it. I think I know that there's pedestrian improvements, so that for folks walking across the bridge. I don't recall. Don't hold me to this, but I seem to recall that it's currently going to be striped for 1 lane in each direction because that's the road that it's feeding. But I think it's being constructed wide enough to be 4 lanes in the future. But I'll have to double check that and get back to you.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of issues and problems with Union Road, and you're absolutely correct as far as the width and so forth on the 4 lanes. And I don't know if there's a way to salvage the existing bridge for 2 lanes, and it has a lousy curvature going in there. I don't know how I think land was acquired from the Felices to kind of straighten that out too.
Yeah, I think we're still working on that. Yeah. So the other thing that I've asked staff to look at is, especially now that we have an expectation of additional road funding, is looking at improving the alignment of Union as it goes through there. If you're coming south and you get off the bridge, it makes that kind of weird S curve as it connects to San Benito there, and looking at potentially, you know, what we can design there to make that intersection safer and better.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
as
thank
part
you.
of the project.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the last active project. We also have another bridge project down another bridge on Pinoche Road, but that's currently an approved project, but it's not an activated project in the bridge program. And until we get some of these projects completed, I would advise against activating it. I don't think District 5 would allow us to activate it until we show some progress on some of these existing projects. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board? I'll open it up for public comment. Any comments from the public?
Good morning. Good afternoon, supervisors. Chair Botello. My name is Robert Johnson, and I am the general manager for the Aromas Water District. No, I am not Vicki Morris, and I've been there roughly about 15 months and trying to catch up on what's going on through all the workings of the water district that sits in 2 counties and in Chair Botello's district. It's a pleasure to meet all of you, and I do look forward to working with you all in the future. As it relates to this item before you, and specifically the Rocks Road Bridge project, our district would like to recommend that the Rocks Road Bridge be taken off of your list of bridges to be worked on. As Mr. Girton stated, you can easily miss the bridge as you drive over it a lot of times, and it does take a while to actually find it. Our water main runs along Rocks Road, and at that crossing we actually had to drill, like bore and jack, if you will, to go under the creek bed to make that connection out to the Rancho Larios area. And so any type of additional work that's going to be related to that project is going to cost our smaller district really a great deal of money, and we have expended a lot of money for this project in the past, as I understand it. I've seen a large file in my office. I have not looked through it because I felt this would come up at some time, but I thought it might come farther, down the road in my career for this. And I just happened to catch your agenda item this morning, and I was working with PG&E and Mr. Girton's former employer, Monterey County RMA, for an issue we have. So I've lost most of the morning, so I wasn't able to review it as much as I'd like. So basically, I'd like to ask for if there is an opportunity or need to move this project forward, that we can work together collaboratively on a process that is beneficial, that helps the district also. I do know Mr. Girton. Part of my career, I was at Monterey County Water Resources Agency for 28 plus years before coming to Aromas. So Mr. Girton and I worked in the same building near the end of our careers. So with that, I just want to, again, it's nice to meet you. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I would humbly recommend that you take this project out of your list.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else from the public? That I'll close the public comment. I know it. You know, the Rocks Road Bridge has never been real high on my priority list of fixing, and I don't know if there's some. You know, last I heard, there might have been some design realignment that might not affect the water district's line. I don't know if that's even possible. You have been, I know you have some thoughts. John, go ahead.
I don't. This is actually a new issue to me, so I'm more than happy to work with Rob. As he said, we've worked together in the past, and we've always worked well together. And so we can sit down with him and his staff and get the engineers to talk about what the possible options are, and then bring that back to your board. I don't know. I'm sure that there's probably several options. I don't know, but we'll have to talk with them and understand what the issues are out there. I'm fairly sure that the engineers that we have working on it are well acquainted with the issues, more so than I am. So unfortunately, somebody told staff that they could go and see their families for the holiday, so I couldn't have them here so they could answer these things.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I would encourage you to work with Mr. Johnson and find out some solution. You know, it's been a frustrating bridge for me personally, being a representative of that district. It's just doesn't make any sense that you can't hang a water pipe off the bottom of that bridge and reconnect it on the other end and save a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. But with that, I know you inherited a colossal mess with these bridge projects. That was, you know, previous boards and administration just wasn't aware of what was going on, and it's pretty frustrating. And we're very fortunate that, you know, we're not liable for full reimbursement of Caltrans obligations, and us not having any bridges and no means of fixing them. So I think we still got to move forward and take advantage of this, the opportunity to get these projects complete.
Yeah. So not to pile on too much, but there's more. Like I said, there are hurdles that we still have to overcome with a lot of these projects. The one that concerns me the most is that most of these are reaching the end of their approved time for getting certain tasks done. So if we don't get preliminary engineering done in 10 years, then we can lose the funding. And like I said, I've had to call in every favor that I had, plus future favors with District 5 to get them to work with us on these things. And so I think right now, because we're showing progress and we're showing dedication from the board and from staff to keep these things moving and get them going, we've bought some goodwill. And so I think we can do the right thing and get most of these to right-of-way acquisition in a timely manner, just under the wire on these 10-year limits that we have under most of these. Some of these have already received extensions, and so if we can keep them going, then we'll be okay. But I think we've bought enough goodwill showing them that we're making considerable improvement to where I think that they're willing to work with us on extensions. But there are still hurdles that we may need to come back and talk to you about.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion for staff recommendation.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I make a motion we authorize RMA Director to request $687,068 from COG Regional RST funds for local projects and approve 14, 15, and 16.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We have one real quick one. The calendar for next year is item 24. We'll knock that out and take lunch on before closed session.
Motion to approve.
Did you have something to say?
Yes, and then there's also one short urgency item that Health and Human Services would like to address with the board. It should only take a minute or two.
Oh, okay.
What is this?
Well, we need to know what it is. I mean,
Okay.
we need to approve it that it's an urgency
Okay.
item.
Right.
Yeah.
You want? Okay.
Let me, Mr. Chair, let me continue on with this one, and then
let's do that
Then I'll
first.
invite County Council to discuss the item with you.
Okay.
So we're on item number 24 on our agenda. This is regarding our schedule for the upcoming year. We do this every year. I wanted to present the outline or the draft to your board for approval. We have some highlights here: the swearing-in ceremony, January 7th at 10 a.m., our board meeting following week on the 15th, and the holidays associated there. We've outlined the new calendar to accommodate special board meetings for budget. In years past, prior to me coming on board, we didn't really have special board meetings for budget items to discuss. So this year, I think it's going to be important to discuss those items with as many projects as we have, and also to some new board members coming on board. With regards to the budget, we have June 24th as our budget adoption date. And then in July, we have a NACO conference in that week of July, or in the first few weeks of July. We have CSAC conference at the end of the year, as well as RCRC at the end as well. The one item I did want to talk to you about, Mr. Chair and board members, is February. And that has to do with our board retreat. We have outlined here the 13th of February through the 15th. Last year, I think it was a pretty good retreat. We actually had our retreat located at San Juan Oaks. Unfortunately, they cannot accommodate us for the 3 days. And the reason why we are requesting your board to have a 3-day board retreat is to discuss policy, ordinance review, best practices, as well as creating a strategic plan for the county. I think it's going to be important in light of who we are, so to speak, with the county. We had a meeting the other day, an agenda item that discussed technology versus ag, and I think it's really the time for the board to discuss what direction we want to go with economic development and that kind of thing. So I think it'll be a very good meeting. We've already started working on creating an agenda for that. But I think it's definitely going to be more than just 1 day for that. In addition to that, I've asked RMA. We've discussed the possibility of having a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and your board. So we were thinking about doing it in this time frame. That way, the Planning Commission will hear kind of the direction after the strategic plan for the county, what direction the board would like to go, and vision that the board has. So with that being said, those 3 days won't work at San Juan Oaks. We can make it for another location. We can have it at the Sheriff's Building. We can keep those dates tentative. Again, it's a special board meeting that we'd be labeling it, so we can obviously remove it from the docket if we have to, or keep it on. So the other option is to put it is to have it on February the 20th through the 22nd, but that'll be a busy week. There's a holiday as well as a board meeting scheduled, and the retreat. I don't know. I think that's going to be a little bit too much for 1 week. the entire week to be allocated to meetings for the board. So with that being said, that's the calendar before you. If you have any comments or questions or thoughts, I'm more than willing to answer your questions.
Okay, all right, good. I could support that. I think we have a lot of information, especially with a couple of new members on the board. It's pretty complex, different issues that we manage in departments. Any other thoughts from my colleagues? Okay. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
A motion to approve.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Hearing none. County Council?
Yes, the board would like to, first of all, the board would have to add an item to the board's agenda by taking a vote that the item came to the attention of the agency after the posting of the agenda, and it cannot reasonably wait until the next meeting. Jim, would you like to just highlight the basics of what the issue is, and then they can add it to the agenda, and then they could take action on it?
Okay, briefly. A few days ago, we had a gentleman show up at the Hollister.
A few days ago?
A few days ago.
Go ahead, if you could
We had a gentleman show up in Hollister who is aged and has dementia. He managed somehow to wander here from another state. He is a resident of Texas. He has a sister in Texas. We have been in touch with the authorities in Texas, and we would like to return him home. So we'll need permission for out-of-state travel, and we are also using a couple of deputies from the sheriff just to be sure that he is safe and safely gets there. So we'll need that permission and also authority for the CAO to sign the requisition, because it'll be over our signing authority.
Motion to put it on the agenda under urgency items qualification.
Mr. Chair, doesn't this have to come? Doesn't any of this stuff have to come before we start the meeting?
No, I just found out about that they were planning to travel, I think this week, tomorrow. I just found out about that right now.
As soon as we can make the arrangements, yes.
But this was known to you a couple of days ago?
It's been about 2 days.
I'll second the motion, and then we can have the discussion. So, anyhow, why don't we go ahead and put it on
But we have
the
to vote
agenda?
on. We have to vote on it first.
Pardon me?
We have to vote on it first. You just seconded it. We have to vote.
To put it on
Oh,
the
yeah,
agenda.
that's right. To put it on the and so all those in favor say aye.
No.
Aye.
No.
Okay.
Wait.
Do we have let's go ahead with a roll call vote on the urgency item.
No.
Roll call vote.
Medina?
No.
Okay.
Rivas?
Yes.
Munson?
No.
Matello?
Yes.
On the swing vote.
I think it requires 4/5 vote, actually.
Oh, it dies. That's right. I was going to say that's right. It dies 4/5. It dies.
Okay.
We'll return to the board in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll adjourn for lunch.
Oh, okay.
Will the board come back in an hour?
Yeah, an hour, Mr. Chair. 1:30.
Okay, we'll come back at 1:30, have closed session.